Hello everyone, Omni-Sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as the Shadow Monarch in the DC Universe, Part 2. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Arthur's fist connected with a sickening crunch. The impact sent Deathstroke hurtling backward, slamming into the warehouse wall with enough force to dent the metal. The assassin let out a sharp grunt as dust and debris rained down around him. Arthur exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders as he walked toward the fallen mercenary, his steps deliberate, unhurried. But just as he closed the distance, he stopped. A cold, suffocating aura spread through the air, like a predator locking onto wounded prey. Deathstroke, still slumped against the wall, stiffened. His breath hitched just for a fraction of a second as Arthur's bloodlust crashed over him like a tidal wave. Arthur's blue eyes gleamed in the dim light. "I'm gonna ask you this once." His voice was calm, eerily so. "What do you know about my family?" He crouched slightly, tilting his head. "And just so you understand, I don't need you to talk. I have other means of getting what I want. I'm offering you a chance." For the first time, something flickered behind Deathstroke's mask, a mix of fear and unease, and then he laughed. A raspy chuckle at first, then a deep, unsettling laugh that echoed through the empty warehouse. It wasn't just fear. There was something else there. "Well," Deathstroke breathed, a smirk audible in his voice, "for starters, I was employed by them, not Lex." His single eye locked onto Arthur. "And you?" Before he could finish, the warehouse doors burst open. Robin entered first, flanked by the Titans. The battle outside was over, their presence signaling the end of the chaos. Robin's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the scene. His voice was sharp, controlled. "Not bad, Arthur. You bested Slade." Arthur exhaled through his nose, barely sparing him a glance. "And I see you guys handled the rest." Beast Boy let out an exaggerated groan, stretching his arms. "Man, your demons, or whatever they were, something else." Blue Beetle chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah, they're still out there, by the way. Still punching." Arthur didn't react. His focus remained on Deathstroke, and he would have kept pressing the assassin for answers. Deathstroke looked at Robin and smirked, still lying on the ground, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "This is your problem, Boy Wonder," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "You're soft. You're weak." His eye flicked toward Arthur. I was starting to like this guy, but Arthur noticed the subtle movement. But Slade was faster. Arthur's jaw clenched. "Robin, move!" But it was too late. In a flash, Deathstroke shifted, his body tense despite his injuries. With a flick of his wrist, he fired a shot, not at Arthur. At the Titans. Bang! A shot rang out. Simultaneously, a smoke bomb detonated, swallowing the warehouse in a thick, suffocating fog. Coughs and startled shouts followed as everyone staggered back, momentarily blinded. Arthur cursed under his breath. He swung his great sword, the force of it dispersing the smoke in a single sweep, but Deathstroke was gone. Disappeared like a ghost. The only sign of his escape was the faint sound of footsteps fading into the distance. But then, a sharp inhale. Arthur turned, eyes immediately locking onto Raven. Blood dripped down her shoulder, staining the dark fabric of her cloak. She clutched the wound, her expression neutral, too neutral. But Arthur saw the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers pressed harder than necessary. Without a word, he stepped closer, closing the distance between them. His hand reached out, fingers tilting her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. His touch was firm, but not rough. Up close, he could see the flicker of pain in her violet eyes, the way her breathing had grown slightly uneven. "Let me see," he murmured, his voice lower now, edged with something unreadable. Raven's lips parted slightly, her eyes searching his. For a second, she hesitated, then turned her head slightly, as if trying to pull away, but Arthur didn't let her. "I'm fine," she muttered, but her voice wasn't as steady as before. Arthur wasn't convinced. His grip lingered for a moment longer before he slowly let go. Robin, still recovering from the sudden attack, let out a frustrated breath. "Damn it!" Arthur's gaze snapped to him. Something cold, unreadable flickered in his blue eyes. "Deathstroke was right," he said, voice even but laced with something sharp. "You're soft." Robin's head jerked up at the words, his expression darkening. Arthur continued, unbothered by the tension thickening between them. "You and the Justice League let things like this keep happening by letting people like Slade roam freely." His tone wasn't mocking. Robin opened his mouth to protest, but Arthur didn't let him. "I hope you collected enough data on me," Arthur went on. "And how to neutralize me when the time comes." His gaze didn't waver. "Hell, I'm sure Batman's already informed." Silence. Robin's fingers curled into fists, but he didn't deny it. Arthur took a step back, his gaze flickering toward Starfire. "Take care of Raven." Then he turned to Cyborg. "If you'd be so kind, look into my family. Their background, any deals they made, anything out of the ordinary." His voice remained calm, controlled. "Send it to me, and I'll handle the rest." Robin exhaled sharply. "You know we'll be involved too. We have to investigate this." Arthur gave him a slight, almost dismissive smirk. "Be my guest." And with that, he left. Arthur exhaled, tilting his head up toward the night sky. His fingers twitched at his side. "I don't need Cyborg's information," he murmured to himself. "That was just to let them know I'm clueless." His eyes gleamed. "But I'm not." System notification, remarkable mastery, your shadow soldiers have leveled up to Knight grade. Job rank up, Soul Warden to Necromancer. New job-specific ability unlocked, Shadow Exchange. Arthur smirked as he stepped far away from the Titans, his form vanishing into the darkness beyond their sight. He wasted no time before uttering a single word under his breath. "Exchange." From the depths of Slade's own shadow, something stirred. The shadow soldier Arthur had attached to him tore itself free, twisting and writhing as it pulled away. Slade, already tending to his wounds far from the battlefield, barely had time to react. His instincts flared, something was wrong. Then, the shadows darkened. The air around him twisted unnaturally, like reality itself was bending. And in the next instant, Arthur stepped forth, emerging from a blackened mist where his demon had once been. The exchange was seamless. Perfect. Slade's single eye widened in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me." Arthur tilted his head slightly, his smirk unwavering. "Hello again." For the first time in a long while, Slade felt something creeping up his spine, an unfamiliar chill. He had fought monsters and beings beyond human understanding. But standing before him now, Arthur Blackwind was something else entirely. Something that felt even worse. Arthur took a step forward, the weight of his presence suffocating. "You know, Slade," he began, voice calm, almost conversational, "I didn't want to do this initially. But you forced my hand." His fingers tightened around the hilt of his great sword, shadows coiling hungrily around the blade as if thirsting for what was to come. "You hurt someone I care about." Slade gritted his teeth, reaching for his weapon, but he knew it was pointless. There was no escape. Arthur raised his sword, the obsidian steel humming with dark energy. His eyes gleamed with something ancient, something merciless. "And I don't need you to tell me anything now. Because your shadow will." Slade barely had time to react before the blade descended. A single, decisive strike. Silence. The great assassin, the legendary Deathstroke, fell. Arthur exhaled slowly, lowering his weapon. Blood pooled at his feet, but his gaze remained fixed on the lifeless body before him. Then, with a voice like a quiet storm, he spoke the word that would seal Slade's fate. "Arise." The shadows surged forward, wrapping around Deathstroke's corpse, consuming it in an abyssal darkness. Then, from the void, it emerged. A figure rose, clad in blackened armor, the remnants of Slade's former self still evident in the shape of his frame. But his eye, once filled with cold calculation, now gleamed with an eerie blue light, one of absolute loyalty. The knight kneeled before Arthur, his new master. Arthur looked down at him, satisfaction flickering in his expression. "From now on, you are Blade." The newly reborn Shadow Warrior bowed his head in silent acknowledgement. Arthur sat back in his chair, the soft hum of his computer filling the silence of the room. The faint glow of the screen illuminated his face, highlighting his sharp features as he scanned through pages of information about his family's businesses. It all seemed standard, nothing that stood out or made his stomach churn with unease. Just the usual: real estate holdings, a few tech companies, agricultural investments, some research labs scattered across the globe. Nothing out of the ordinary. He leaned forward, tapping his fingers against the desk, eyes narrowing. "Blackwind Science Group," he muttered under his breath. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he dug deeper into the files. It looked like another generic corporation, focused on genetic engineering and tech innovations. But something felt off. He scratched his head, frustration starting to seep in. Freaking hell, even Cyborg's information is nothing much unless he's keeping things from me, which isn't unlikely. His gaze flicked to his left, where Blade, his newly acquired shadow soldier, knelt on the floor. The figure was still, silent, his head bowed in submission. Arthur's lips curled into a faint smirk, his thoughts drifting. "This is all because you can't speak," he muttered. "How can you be the Deathstroke, but only an elite knight rank shadow soldier? You're a shadow of what you once were, no pun intended." Arthur pushed his chair back and stood up, pacing as his mind wandered. "I need to go back to the tower. Level up some more. Get stronger, so all of you can get stronger as well." The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, darker, as if Arthur's words had summoned something. He glanced to the right where one of the demons sat patiently, watching him with eerie eyes. Arthur stopped in his tracks, a thought suddenly occurring to him. "How can you talk, even though your rank is lower?" he asked, his voice laced with curiosity. The demon's eyes flickered, and then it spoke, a deep, guttural voice escaping its lips. "My lord?" Arthur winced and shook his head, raising a hand in a dismissive gesture. "Just stop." The sound of the demon's voice had unsettled him, but it wasn't the answer he was looking for. The room fell into silence again, save for the soft creak of the chair as Arthur settled back into it. He leaned back, glancing at the screen once more. There was something he was missing. Something deeper than what the files told him. Arthur stared at Blade, his fingers idly rolling the jagged green crystal between them. The kryptonite illuminated the room, casting eerie reflections against the walls. His expression was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the disappointment in his voice. "And I thought you'd be useful." Blade lowered his head even further, pressing his forehead against the cold wooden floor in silent submission. The once feared Deathstroke, now an elite knight in Arthur's Shadow Legion. Arthur let out a slow breath, flexing his fingers before tightening his grip around the Prometheum sword. The weight was perfect, not too light, just right for someone who had grown stronger, far stronger, in the recent time. He inspected the weapon, the dark alloy shimmering under the dim light, and let a small smirk tug at his lips. "Although I did get something amazing," he muttered to himself. Prometheum sword, S-tier, a blade forged from an ultra-dense promethium alloy, known for its near-indestructible properties. The sword is imbued with an adaptive enchantment that sharpens with the wielder's intent. Capable of absorbing kinetic force to reinforce its strikes, it cuts through most materials with ease. Arthur sighed, rolling his shoulders. It was a fitting weapon, especially now that his strength had grown. He pulled up his status screen, scanning the numbers before him. Name, Arthur Blackwind. Job, Soul Warden to Necromancer. Title, Bane of the Unworthy. Plus 20% attack against those who harbor evil intent. Level, 50. Fatigue, 0, HP, 4,450. MP, 6,200. Strength, 104 to 110. Health, 88 to 98. Agility, 54 to 58. Intelligence, 122 to 130. Sense, 54 to 58. Available ability points, 12 to 0. Passive skill, Tenacity, level 1. Job-specific skill, Shadow Extraction. Shadow Exchange. Skills, Bloodlust, level 1. Equipment. Azarath Knight Armor Set. Abyss-Forged Necklace. Prometheum Sword. Inventory Happy Smiley Greatsword of the Lowborn. Tower of Fate Key. Unknown Key. Arthur looked at Blade and sighed, shaking his head. Get up. Blade obeyed immediately, rising to one knee. Arthur studied him for a moment, then held up the kryptonite between two fingers. Just answer me with a nod, he said. Do you know where this shipment came from? Blade's response was swift. He turned his head slightly and gestured toward the computer screen. Arthur followed his gaze, his eyes narrowing as they landed on an image, a sleek, towering skyscraper with the words Blackwind Science Group stamped across its facade. Arthur exhaled sharply through his nose. You did say you were employed by us and not Lex, he muttered, rubbing his temple. His eyes lingered on the tower, mind already racing with possibilities. A bitter chuckle escaped his lips. That's where my brother works. The Tower of Fate can wait for now. I need to get to the bottom of this before the Titans do. The dining room was warm, filled with the soft clatter of silverware and the gentle murmur of conversation. The aroma of roasted meat and spices lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of wine from his mother's glass. It had been a while since Arthur sat at this table, longer still since his brother had joined them. His mother smiled, cutting into her steak as she glanced between her two sons. You know, for the longest time, it was just Adam who barely came home. Now it's you, too, she mused, a teasing lilt in her voice. I suppose that's just part of becoming a man. Hey, she added, don't tell me, it's a girl, isn't it? Arthur exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly, but a smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. You're not far from the truth, he said, taking a sip of his drink. His mother's eyes lit up, and she leaned forward slightly. Oh? Now this is interesting. Across the table, Adam set down his fork, studying Arthur with a thoughtful expression. You look sharper, he said, a genuine smile tugging at his lips. Clearly, you've been working out. Arthur met his brother's gaze, unreadable. His fingers curled slightly around the stem of his glass. Is this the one I suspect? The mastermind running Blackwind Science Group, supplying Lex Luthor with kryptonite, my own brother. That thought unsettled him more than he liked to admit. He got used to seeing the world in black and white lately, those who were threats and those who weren't. But family was different. Arthur clenched his fist under the table, his knuckles pressing into his thigh. Arthur. Adam's voice pulled him back. He blinked, masking the hesitation in his expression before offering a casual shrug. Oh yeah, he said. Working out. You could say that. Adam nodded and got up, seemingly satisfied. Well, as long as my little brother is okay, I'll be leaving soon. Arthur didn't respond immediately, only studying his brother for a moment longer. Then, subtly, without so much as a flicker of movement, he attached a shadow soldier to Adam's form. It slipped into his brother's presence seamlessly, unnoticed, binding itself to his shadow like an unseen phantom. His gaze lingered for a second, his lips pressing into a thin line. There was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, but he pushed it aside. This way, I don't have to infiltrate myself or act weird. Arthur sat on the edge of the rooftop, looking down on the city as it stretched out in a sea of flickering lights. He continued to stare straight ahead at the Blackwind Science Group tower, its sleek glass monolith piercing into the night sky. He let his breath out slowly, rolling his shoulders as he muttered to himself, "This better go smooth without any trouble. I'd like to avoid unnecessary problems." The shadows below him stirred. Without his head turning, Arthur had called his demons and he felt they were pulling free from the darkness. Their twisted forms knelt before him. Their glowing eyes locked onto him, awaiting orders. He didn't hesitate. "Patrol the area," he said, his voice steady. "Stay hidden. If any of the Titans show up or if you see anything unusual, signal me immediately and do not engage." The demons said nothing, they didn't need to. They melted away into the night, dissolving down to the streets below in the blink of an eye. Arthur leaned forward a bit more, his hands tightening on the edge of the rooftop as he continued to watch the tower. Adam sat at his desk, fingers tapping anxiously against the polished wood as the holographic screen in front of him flickered with Lex Luthor's sharp, unamused expression. The tension in the air was suffocating. "A failed shipment, Adam." Lex's tone was low-measured but did not mask that anger. "That kryptonite was crucial for this experiment, and I don't have time to deal with setbacks." Adam rubbed his temples. "I never expected Deathstroke to fumble on an errand so simple, a simple delivery. He fell out of contact. It means the Titan somehow interfered." Lex's face closed down. "Or excuses. Make it right." Adam sat up again and kept all of his emotions tucked away. "Another shipment is headed your way, at the proper coordinates shortly. A deal's a deal, Lex." A moment of silence. Then Lex leaned forward, his expression darkening. "You'd better." His voice dropped to something colder, something final. "Otherwise, I will destroy everything you hold dear." The screen cut off. Adam exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Then, suddenly movement. A ripple in the air, a distortion in the very fabric of the shadows beneath him. Before he could react, something emerged from the darkness, a twisted inky figure rising from his own shadow, its eyes glowing like embers in the dim light. Adam's breath caught in his throat. What the hell? And then, just as quickly, it was gone. Replaced. Where it had been, there was Arthur now, and the air was suffocating. His silhouette was wreathed in shifting, living darkness, the room growing colder with his arrival. His eyes gleamed like a predator's, and in his grip was a sword, its blackened edge reflecting the faint light. Adam's stomach twisted. "You better start talking," Arthur said. Adam's mouth opened slightly, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. "Arthur?" His voice trembled as he stared at the nightmare before him, his own brother swallowed by something unholy, something that felt wrong. Arthur took a slow step forward, his sword's dark edge pointed directly at Adam's chest. His voice was calm, but there was unmistakable weight behind it. "Yes, it's me, brother. I'll ask you one more time." His grip tightened around the hilt. "Tell me everything you know about your deal with Lex." Adam blew air through his nose, eyeing his brother up and down. A smirk pulled at the corner of his lip, but with no humor. "So that's why you look different," he muttered. "Now you look just like them." Arthur's expression didn't change. "Don't try to change the subject." Adam chuckled and shook his head. "Lex is a dangerous man, Arthur. You should know that better than anyone." And you're a fool for making a deal with him, Arthur shot back, his voice colder now. A shadow demon had appeared beside Arthur in that very second, going down on one knee as it offered a broken shard of glowing green crystal in its hands. Arthur snatched up the kryptonite without even a second look and casually flung it toward Adam, the rock skidding across the desk between them. Arthur's eyes clouded. This. What is he going to do with it? He leaned in closer. That shipment was too big for just Superman. You don't need that much unless you're planning something bigger. Adam sighed and rubbed his temples. I see, so it was you who intercepted it. He leaned back, seeming resigned. Very well. Arthur said nothing, waiting. After a moment, Adam finally spoke. Our science division has been working with Lex on a massive project. The money was persuasive. His voice carried a hint of regret, but it was buried beneath his usual composure. He's creating something, someone. A living being designed to be completely immune to kryptonite, so he is running tests after tests. Arthur felt his blood run cold. His breath hitched for just a fraction of a second, but then his whole body tensed, his fingers digging into the hilt of his sword. He didn't need to hear anything else. Doomsday! His mind screamed it. His jaw clenched, and a sharp, dangerous laugh escaped him. Not one of amusement, but disbelief, pure, boiling rage barely contained beneath the surface. You damn idiot! Arthur muttered under his breath. He ran a hand through his hair, his nails scratching against his scalp as he tried to steady himself. How far along is it? Is it alive yet? Adam hesitated, sensing the sheer fury radiating off his brother. I don't know. The thing is in his lab in Metropolis, but from what I do know, it's not ready. Not even close. Arthur finally breathed out and lowered his sword, though the grip remained firm. He half turned away from his brother, rubbing his forehead. I should kill you for this. His voice came tired, raw. But I won't. You should thank our mother for that. Adam didn't say anything. Arthur lifted his gaze again and looked directly into his brother's eyes. But on one condition only. Adam raised an eyebrow. Give me access to that lab in Metropolis. Arthur's tone was resolute, without pause. Or you go yourself and let me handle the rest. Adam's eyes flashed an uncertain feeling. You want me to screw Lex over? Screw over what we have going and let you destroy it all. Arthur gave a mirthless chuckle. Your work won't mean shit when that thing is alive. The gaze hardened further. You already destroyed our family the moment you decided to work with him. Silence. Adam's shoulders sagged slightly, his fingers drumming against the desk in thought. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he finally sighed and reached into his pocket. Fine. He pulled out a small black keycard and tossed it onto the desk. This will get you inside. I'll even arrange a meeting there. After that, you're on your own. Arthur stared at the card, his mind already racing through the possibilities. But then, a cold shiver ran down his spine. His fingers twitched. His senses flared, something was amiss. His connection to his shadows outside had been smooth until now, his mana was depleting, little by little. Arthur let out a sigh, rubbing his temple. Intruders. Adam tensed. What? Arthur cocked his head slightly, eyes narrowing in focus on the fading presence of one of his shadow soldiers outside. One of my demons is getting constantly destroyed. He clicked his tongue in annoyance. A second of silence. Then it clicked. Arthur breathed sharply out and shook his head. TCH. The Titans. Arthur barely looked at his brother as a shadow soldier appeared beside him, its eyes aglow and fixed on Adam like a silent sentinel. I'm assigning him to you, Arthur said flatly. Wherever you go, he follows, so don't try and back away from this. Go home or head straight to Metropolis for that meeting. I don't care. Just stay out of my way. Adam hesitated, his fingers twitching slightly as if debating whether to argue. But he wasn't stupid. He knew when to push and when to back off. With a sharp exhale, he nodded. Fine. I'll go immediately arrange that meeting. He shot one last glance at Arthur, his expression unreadable, then turned and walked out without another word. The door clicked shut behind him. Arthur blew his breath out hard, rubbing the bottom half of his face. What a mess! He muttered under his breath. He turned to the floor-to-ceiling window. Gazing down at the city, he noted how peaceful it looked, a stark contrast to the chaos inside him. His reflection stared back from the glass, dark, wreathed in shifting shadows. His eyes colder than he remembered. A few minutes earlier, the Titans moved through the perimeter in a blur. Robin led the way, his eyes sharp as he scanned their surroundings. His instincts had been screaming at him since the moment they'd intercepted the kryptonite shipment, and now that one of his creatures was here. That just sealed the deal for him. One of Arthur's summons is here, he growled, clenching his staff tightly. Which means that he is too. Beside him, Raven hovered a little off the ground, arms folded. Is that a bad thing? He did mention he'll investigate as well, she asked, her voice calm, but there was a flicker of something beneath it, faith, maybe even a hint of uncertainty. Robin threw her a glance. It means he'd better not be an obstacle to us. We already know that his family has some relations to Lex, and I don't fully trust him. Raven's lips compressed in a considering frown. She wasn't one to let people in straight away either, but there was something about Arthur that gave her pause. Still, she said nothing. Fine, she said only. Meanwhile, a few feet ahead, Cyborg was dealing with an entirely different issue altogether. The sonic cannon was a bright blue as he shot Arthur's shadow demon into bits, yet watched in seconds as it reconstructed itself. He gritted his teeth. Man, is this thing invincible and it's not fighting back, he growled gruffly. No matter how many times he dropped it, the thing got up. But then, something else happened. The shadow quivered, as if it felt something, and instead of just growing back once more, it suddenly retreated, melting into the darkness, slipping toward the building in less than a whisper of wind. Cyborg furrowed his brow. Wait, what? For a second, there was confusion on his face, but he did not overthink it for too long. Rather, he pressed on. The Titans burst into Adam Blackwind's office, prepared for a fight if necessary. Instead of Adam, someone else was waiting for them. Arthur sat in his brother's chair, completely at ease, legs kicked up onto the desk as if he owned the place. Shadows curled around him, shifting unnaturally in the poor light. His piercing blue eyes flicked up to meet theirs as the room tensed with silent conflict. Raven was the first to break the silence, her voice edged with concern and frustration. Arthur! Robin didn't waste any time, his eyes sharp. Where's your brother? Arthur barely moved. He only tipped his head a little. I don't know. The words were smooth, sounded even indifferent, but the answer came too easily. Robin's eyes narrowed. I don't buy that. Arthur huffed and finally sat up, but he still looked completely unbothered. How much do you really know about this whole mess with Lex? Robin's teeth clenched. Enough to consider Adam Blackwind a dangerous individual who needs to be questioned, you as well if my gut feeling is correct. Arthur blew out through his nose, shaking his head faintly. I said I'll handle this matter. You know I cannot let you do that. His gaze flickered around the group, and a cold curl of his lips was somewhere between humor and disdain. Don't you have better things to do? Like imprisoning high-threat criminals like Deathstroke and then letting them go free? Gotta keep yourselves entertained somehow, right? Raven's face faltered, but she moved closer, her voice softer this time. Arthur, please. For a moment, Arthur just stared at them, his expression unreadable. Then he pushed himself out of the chair, standing to his full height. His voice was steady, unwavering. It became a family matter the moment I saw my name involved. I really can't let you interfere more than you already have. He reached for his sword, its weight comforting in his grasp as he drew it out in a single, smooth movement. Under the office lights, the metal shone bright and powerful. Instantly, Robin's eyes shot to the blade, something quivering behind the mask of his gaze. Is that? At his elbow, Blue Beetle tensed, his armor ratcheting down as the scarab began to react to the escalating intensity. You really don't want to do this, Arthur. Arthur's blue eyes burned, his grip on the Prometheum sword tightening as the shadows around him deepened. His voice was low, controlled but laced with something dangerous. I do not. A sweep of eyes over them after that, like a storm gathered in the stillness of weighty words yet to be unleashed. But your hypocrisy leaves a man no choice. The moment was thick with tension. Blue Beetle's scarab was the first to react, its alien instinct sensing the imminent danger radiating from Arthur. Threat detected, immediate action required. Before anyone could speak, Blue Beetle lunged forward, his arm transforming into a pulsating energy cannon. Guess we're doing this, he shouted as a blast of blue energy tore through the air, streaking straight toward Arthur. Arthur moved before the attack even fully formed a blur of shadows and motion. Twisting to the side, the blast seared past him, shattering part of the office wall. In the same fluid motion, he closed the distance, his Prometheum sword gleaming under the flickering lights. His blade arced toward Blue Beetle's chest, intent on ending this fast, but Robin was already moving. The leader of the Titans shot forward in a blur, his years of training kicking in as he lashed out with a powerful kick. It struck Arthur's side, stopping his momentum but barely moving him. Arthur skidded back only a step, his body absorbing the impact with unnatural ease. His face did not change. Then, without a second's hesitation, he flipped his sword into a reverse grip and in his free hand, a huge greatsword materialized out of nothing. Robin's eyes went wide. Arthur swung. Robin barely dodged, feeling the pure force of the swing as the greatsword cleaved through the air where his head had been a second ago. It slammed into the ground, sending cracked spiderwebbing across the floor. Stop this! Raven's voice cut through the chaos. Nobody listened. Starfire hovered slightly above the ground, her fists glowing faintly with barely restrained energy. This did not feel right. Arthur had never struck her as an enemy, yet the way his shadows twisted unnaturally around him made her hesitate beside her. Beast Boy shifted uneasily, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by something tense. Man, this is messed up, I thought we were cool, he muttered. Beast Boy shot a quick glance at Starfire, silently asking the same question running through both their minds, should we really fight him? Arthur's blue eyes flared like weird flames as he stepped forward, the darkness collecting around his feet. His voice was cold and in command. Come out. The shadows at his feet churned unnatural, and then they rose. First was Blade, the elite knight of darkness, kneeled before Arthur, obsidian armor glinting like it had been tore from a dark dream. The rest followed to complete the assembly of shadows that grew into shadowy demons. Robin's jaw clenched, and he took a step back, his hand tightening on his staff. That shadow! It looks so familiar, he muttered under his breath. A terrible realization burrowed into his gut. I really hope it's not what I think it is. Arthur didn't even flinch. It doesn't matter what you think. Then his voice lowered, laced with an almost amused cruelty. Teach them a lesson. Blade exploded forward, his dark sword clashing against Robin's staff with an earth-shaking impact. The sheer force sent Robin skidding back as the knight loomed over him, relentless. Blue Beetle didn't hesitate. With a sharp whoosh, his jet thrusters engaged, sending him barreling forward, his gauntlet shifting into a razor-edged energy blade. You're making this harder than it needs to be, man, he shouted as he swung. Arthur dodged with smooth ease, letting the energy blade slice through nothing but air. Before Blue Beetle could correct his movement, Arthur counterattacked hard. A brutal right hook slammed into Blue Beetle's ribs, and the force was so strong it made his armor whine under the pressure. Before he could react, Arthur pivoted and slammed his knee into Jamie's stomach, and the Titan grunted as the air was knocked from his lungs. But Arthur wasn't done. In one swift motion, he hunched over, bringing his elbow down onto Blue Beetle's back, which sent him crashing to the ground. The scarab screeched in protest, trying to recalibrate. Jamie gritted his teeth. All right, that hurt. With a burst of energy, his jet thrusters fired on, flipping him upright just in time for him to block Arthur's follow-up strike. Arthur's Prometheum sword came slicing down, aiming to cleave through his defenses. Boom! A scarab shield materialized to life around Jamie and blocked the blade at the very last second. The shock of the impact was like an aftershock of an earthquake and ripped through the entire office, shattering glass, furniture, and blowing debris around. The whole place now looked like a battlefield. Arthur stood in the center of the wrecked office, his Prometheum sword gleaming in the dim light, surrounded on all sides by the Titans. His shadow demons prowled like wolves, their piercing eyes locked onto their prey. Blue Beetle was struggling, his armor thrashing against the swarm of shadows enveloping him, while Robin barely kept Blade at bay, his staff clashing against the towering specter's dark blade. Arthur's eyes flickered across the battlefield, noting something. Wait! He narrowed his glowing blue eyes. Where the hell is Cyborg? Before he could dwell on it further, a massive force crashed into him. Arthur grunted as two huge, fur-covered arms clamped around his torso. Beast Boy, transformed into a massive grizzly bear, let out a roar as he lifted Arthur clean off the ground in a crushing bear hug. Arthur, stop! Beast Boy's voice rumbled. This isn't the way. Arthur exhaled slowly. His body blurred with dark energy. Shadow exchange. In an instant, Arthur vanished from Beast Boy's grasp. Instead, he was holding one of his shadow demons. What? Beast Boy barely had time to react before a fist slammed into his side like a cannonball. The force sent him flying, crashing through a desk and skidding across the floor, leaving deep claw marks. Arthur didn't even pause. He was already moving. Robin saw it coming, but barely. Arthur's knee drove into Robin's chest, lifting him off his feet. The Titan leader barely managed to twist midair, using the momentum to flip and land on one knee, coughing blood. Arthur was relentless. He leapt forward, his sword gleaming. Robin braced. Boom! A stream of starbolts rained down, forcing Arthur to pivot. Starfire hovered above, her hands burning with celestial energy. I am sorry, Arthur. She fired again. But you are hurting my friends. Before the bolts could reach him, a black blur cut through the air. Blade. Arthur's shadow soldier intercepted, his massive sword deflecting the energy blasts like a wall of darkness. Starfire's eyes widened, just before Blade swung. Whoosh! She barely dodged, flipping midair as the blackened steel carved through the space she occupied a second ago. Arthur turned back to Robin, activating Bloodlust, stepping forward with slow, deliberate steps. His aura flared, his glowing blue eyes piercing through the dust-filled air. Just like you value your family, Arthur's voice was cold, but steady. I'll protect my own. Robin gritted his teeth, pushing himself to his feet. Arthur raised his sword, the edge of the blade humming with dark energy, and then his hand froze. Arthur's eyes snapped to the side. An invisible force held his arm in place. His glowing gaze locked onto Raven. Her own eyes glowed, her cloak billowing from the sheer power radiating off her. Dark energy swirled at her fingertips. Arthur, you don't have to do this. Her glowing white eyes bore into his, power thrumming around her. I know why you're fighting. I can feel it. Arthur's grip on his sword tightened, but he said nothing. You think you don't have a choice, but you do. Raven's voice softened. You're not doing this because you want to kill us. You're holding back. Arthur's expression darkened, but she continued. You're not trying to win. You're just trying to keep us away. She took a slow step forward. This isn't just about family, is it? It's about your sense of justice. Arthur exhaled sharply through his nose, his aura flickering for just a second. You don't know what you're talking about. His voice was firm, but there was a crack in it. I do. Raven's power pulsed again, her magic still holding his arm in place. I know you, Arthur. And if you really wanted to take some of us down, you would have done it by now. Arthur's gaze flicked to the corner of his vision, his system pulsing with a notification. Daily quest, time remaining, 5. 4. He exhaled sharply, and the swirling shadows around him receded, slithering back into his own shadow like obedient servants returning to their master. Robin pushed himself up, jaw tight, bruised but still standing. Blue Beetle rolled his shoulder, his armor flickering where Arthur's blows had landed. Beast Boy groaned, shifting back into human form, while Starfire hovered, her eyes filled with uncertainty, torn between duty and trust. And then there was Raven. Her gaze steady, power still lingering in the air, as if she wasn't quite ready to let him go. She was right. He hadn't gone for a single fatal strike. Even when he had the chance. Arthur sighed, rolling his neck before leveling his eyes at Robin. Consider yourself lucky. His voice was calm but edged with warning. Next time, I won't be so lenient. And whatever data you have on me. His lips curled, not quite a smirk, not quite a threat. It'll be outdated. And in the blink of an eye. Arthur Blackwind was gone. The room was dead silent for a moment, save for the faint hum of the lights overhead and the distant sound of sirens from the city below. Robin's fists clenched at his sides, his breathing still ragged from the fight. His jaw tightened as he stared at the spot where Arthur had just stood. Damn it! His voice was low, but the frustration in it was palpable. He hated feeling outmaneuvered. Outclassed. And Arthur had done both effortlessly. Blue Beetle's scarab clicked and whirred in his head, scanning the area where Arthur had vanished. Threat lost. Tactical recalibration required. Jamie exhaled, rubbing his temple. Yeah, no kidding. He glanced at Robin. So, are we just gonna ignore the part where he nearly wiped the floor with us? Beast Boy groaned from where he lay sprawled on the floor. I vote we ignore that part. He sat up slowly, rubbing his ribs. Dude hit like a freaking truck. He shook his head. No. Like 10 trucks. Starfire lowered herself to the ground, her brows furrowed in thought. He was holding back. Her voice was softer, almost hesitant. She turned to Robin. You saw it too, didn't you? He had so many chances, especially against you, but he didn't. Raven was the last to speak. She stood frozen for a second, her hands still faintly glowing with dark energy. But her mind was elsewhere, her expression distant. She had felt it. Arthur's rage, his frustration, his fierce loyalty. But more than that, she had felt his hesitation. He hadn't wanted this fight. Not really. Slowly, her hands lowered, and she let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. I'm not giving up on you, she said quietly. Dark. Cold, dank air clung to his skin as Arthur stood in the middle of a poorly lit corridor, the flickering lights above casting eerie shadows on the cracked and stained walls. The faint echoes of screams from afar and manic laughter slithered through the halls. A system notification blinked in front of him. Penalty zone activated, survive for hours restrictions, Job-specific skills, locked. Most abilities, locked. Rewards. +3 stat increase plus random skill. Arthur let out a sharp exhalation. I was too busy, or maybe my mind was too clouded. I forgot to do my daily quest. He shook his head, his shoulders rolling as the weight fell upon him. He looked around, his instincts on high alert. I need to go after Lex, but first, where the hell am I? Then, his eyes finally managed to adjust through the dimmed light to gaze at rusted iron doors, blistering paint jobs, and scratches of insane-looking writings into the walls. At the top, Arkham Asylum. Clearly, the expression on Arthur's face had darkened now, of course, perfect place for punishment. In a flash, another notification arrived. Survive. He let out a soft sigh, his Prometheum sword materializing in his grip, cold metal humming with power. If I'd ended up here at level 1, I might have been worried. He tightened his grip, his glowing blue eyes scanning the darkness ahead. A twisted grin formed on his lips. But whatever horrors this place holds, they should be the ones worried. The air was thick with madness in that asylum. Long shadows danced along the cracked walls, cast by the flickering bulbs overhead, twisting and distorting, like the grasping hands of the damned. As soon as Arthur took a step forward, a guttural scream tore through the silence. There came a sudden crashing open of the door to his right, a wild-eyed lunatic with eyes wide, with manic smile hunched over himself and flung at him, his tattered straitjacket flapping open, words carved into his chest in huge, jagged, self-inflicted wounds read, "Smile." He's always watching. Arthur didn't hesitate. His sword cleaved through flesh like paper, his cut severing the man's upper half from his legs in one stroke. Blood sprayed on the walls as the deranged laughter of the dying man bubbled up and he collapsed in a heap. The others allowed Arthur barely a moment to breathe before 3 more came barreling toward him, one wielding a rusted pipe, another gnawing on a severed hand, and the last shrieking incomprehensible gibberish. "He knows what you are." Arthur ducked under the first swing, pivoted, and rammed his blade through the lunatic's gut. A wet gasp escaped the man's lips before Arthur yanked his sword free, spinning around just in time to decapitate the second. The third leaped at him, clawed fingers reaching for his face, only for Arthur to sidestep and drive his elbow into the man's throat. The lunatic gagged, stumbling back, only for Arthur to step forward and impale him through the heart. "You all die too easy," he exhaled, flicking the blood off his sword. The asylum wasn't relenting. Creaking doors groaned open, footsteps echoed, and hallways were alive with whispers. In this place, madness itself seemed to breathe. Then he heard it. A laugh. Not just any laugh. A slow, crawling chuckle that seeped into his bones, bounced off the walls, growing louder and louder until it was all he could hear. Ah ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Arthur clenched his jaw. Freaking clown. He shook his head, forging ahead. The laughter continued, a mocking, unseen presence that set his skin crawling. It wasn't mere illusion. The asylum was trying to break him, burrow into his mind. Too bad for it, it lasted for a couple of hours, but Arthur Blackwin didn't break. Then, without warning, something big burst through a steel enforcement door ahead, sending debris flying. Arthur instinctively raised his sword, his glowing blue eyes narrowing as a massive, deformed figure lumbered forward, wheezing with every breath. "You don't belong here." Before him stood the hulking form of Bane, veins bulging with raw power, his mask hissing as venom pumped through his body. His knuckles cracked as he stepped over the wreckage of the door, his red eyes locking onto Arthur. Arthur tilted his head, smirking. "Yeah, you could say that. I missed my daily quest, you see." Bane did not tarry. He let out a roar and plunged, his fist falling with a lot of force. Arthur dodged aside with barely enough time for the spot where he was standing to cave in under the weight of the blow. A column of dust and debris erupted into the air, but Arthur was already running, his instincts honed, his sword swimming with lethal precision. One brutal, hacking slash, and Arthur cut through Bane's arm at the shoulder. The huge limb hit the earth with a bloody splat, blood spurting widely as from a fire hydrant as Bane let out a guttural roar of agony. Yet, instead of faltering, instead of collapsing in pain, he kept coming. Arthur barely had time to wrap his head around it before the fist Bane had left swung with monstrous force, catching him right in the chest. Crack! The force of the blow sent Arthur flying across the room like a human cannonball, crashing him through a rusted cell door. Metal creaked, walls cracked, and he tumbled across the floor until he finally came to a stop, flipping back onto his feet. Arthur exhaled sharply, his body screaming from the outright power. The hell? Bane staggered, his breath ragged, blood gushing from the stump where his arm once was, but his eyes? They were still burning with rage. Weak. Bane growled, venom still coursing through his veins. Arthur clicked his tongue, gripping his sword tighter. Dude, you've got one arm left. Don't start talking shit. His sword shone with dark energy as he sprang forward, closing the distance in an instant. His blade cut through the air, forcing Bane to block, but Arthur used the momentum to leap over him. Twisting mid-air, his great sword materialized out of nothingness and brought it down crack. Bane grunted, stumbling forward as blood dripped from his shoulder. Arthur landed behind him, rolling his neck. I could keep doing this all day. Bane growled. His hand reached for the tubes on his back, aiming to shoot in a bigger dose of venom. There was no way Arthur was going to let him do that. He disappeared in a flash, shadow stepped behind Bane, and before he reappeared, his sword had already ripped through the tubes of venom. SHRRKKK. With a hiss, the gas that escaped was trailed by Bane's agonizing roar. Muscle somewhat flattened, his actions became sluggish now. Arthur wasted no time. A roundhouse kick to his face sent Bane reeling backward. Arthur took immediate advantage, launching into attack after attack until his sword deeply bit into the flesh and shredded through weak defense after weak defense, until the final slash threw Bane down onto the ground, unmoving. Arthur stood over him, breathing while catching his breath. The laughter whispers danced along his mind once again. Gazing slowly back down the corridor, he let out a gasp. Bodies lay in heaps, faces twisted and grinning grotesquely into eternity, their clown masks still worn. Arthur whistled sharply and hopped onto the pile, plopping himself down and laying his sword over his shoulder. That clown had better pray to God I never find him in real life. System notification penalty zone time remaining, 5. 4. 3. Arthur sighed, gripping his sword tighter. About damn time. Metropolis LexCorp. Outside its glass walls, the conference room overlooked the city, its skyline aglow with the neon lights of the metropolis. Inside, the tension was palpable as Lex Luthor sat at the head of a long, sleek table, his fingers steepled together, his face a mask of thinly veiled irritation. Across the table, Adam Blackwind shifted slightly and began very precisely to pick and choose each and every word carefully. Mr. Luthor, I insisted on this urgent meeting because I believe the projected logistics of our partnership need fine-tuning. There have been unexpected delays in resource acquisition, and if we... Lex blew out sharply through his nose, already bored. Adam, you came all this way for this, I don't need excuses. I need results. I trust you wouldn't waste my time with something so... He gestured vaguely, trivial, considering what's at stake. Adam forced a polite chuckle. Of course, Mr. Luthor. I just thought it would be best to personally make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible. Lex's lips curled in displeasure. This was a waste of time. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket in one smooth motion. If that's all, I have more important matters to attend to. He turned to leave. And then would you take me to your lab if I asked you nicely? Lex froze mid-step. Something felt wrong. The voice, it sounded similar, but not quite. It had a weight to it, a depth that Adam's never did. Something unnatural. Lex turned slowly, expecting to see the man he was talking to seconds ago. Except it wasn't Adam. His sharp gaze locking onto the man sitting beside Adam. The air in the room was off, darker, heavier. The lights of the city outside cast long, unnatural shadows, like the things moved of their own accord. And at the center of it sat a figure wreathed in writhing darkness, an aura of pure menace rolling off him in waves. Lex's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" The figure smiled, his glowing blue eyes standing out amidst the swirling abyss around him. Now, Mr. Luther. Let's not waste time with introductions." The shadows around him deepened, pulsing like a living entity, tendrils of darkness creeping along the table. "We both know you, and I have somewhere important to be." Lex Luthor had faced many threats in his life: metahumans, gods, a Kryptonian. But this? This was something new. Arthur stalked forward, the shadows curling and shifting with each step, bending to his presence like an unseen force of nature. Lex's hand shot towards a hidden button beneath the conference table, but before he could press it, his body jerked violently into the air. An invisible force gripped him, lifting him effortlessly as if he weighed nothing. His suit tightened around his throat, his breath caught in his lungs. Arthur's cold, glowing eyes bore into him. "Don't do anything stupid, Luther. You're a smart man, act like it." Lex gritted his teeth, struggling against the unseen force. "What the hell are you?" he demanded. A chuckle came from the side. "Oh, you'll love this one, Lex," Adam said, leaning back against the table, arms crossed. "He's my little brother." Lex's eyes widened. "You're what?" He twisted his head towards Adam, still suspended in the air. "I thought your brother was just some kid, not..." His gaze snapped back to Arthur's shadow-cloaked form. "Some lunatic with powers." Adam smirked. "Yeah, he's full of surprises." His eyes flicked toward Arthur, intrigued. "Seriously, though. What can't you do?" Arthur barely spared him a glance. "I can't make stupid deals with dangerous people that would destroy my name." Silence. Adam's smirk faltered, his expression tightening for the first time. Arthur turned to him. "Good work coming here fast." Adam exhaled, regaining his composure. "Of course. Took the fastest private jet I had." "I always keep my word, brother." Arthur gave him a slow nod. "Then go. I'll take it from here." Adam raised an eyebrow. "And leave you alone with Lex Luthor." Arthur tilted his head, his glowing blue eyes burning through the dim room. "Look at me. Do I look like I need help?" Adam studied him for a long moment, then chuckled, shaking his head. "Fine. But be careful." Arthur finally smirked, looking at Lex. Luthor should be the one worrying about that. The LexCorp building was as pristine as ever, its corridors bustling with executives, scientists, and security personnel. Yet, as Arthur and Lex walked side by side, nobody dared to intervene. Maybe it was the subtle tension in the air, the way Arthur's presence made the light flicker, or perhaps it was because Lex Luthor, had his hands bound behind his back by some unseen force and still walked as if he were in control. Lex's expression remained neutral, but his jaw tightened as they passed a few high-ranking employees. Some slowed their steps, eyes flicking between him and Arthur, but a single cold glance from their CEO sent them moving along. Lex finally broke the silence. "You know, it's a little excessive parading me around my own building like this." Arthur didn't even glance at him. "You'll live." Lex exhaled sharply through his nose. "At least let me use my hands." "I assume you didn't drag me all the way here just to humiliate me in front of my staff." Arthur smirked. "Nope. You're not using your hands until we reach your lab. Lex narrowed his eyes, his patience wearing thin. And if I refuse? Arthur gave him a sidelong glance, his glowing blue eyes carrying a quiet, dangerous amusement. Then I'll carry you. Lex clenched his jaw. He let out a sharp breath and kept walking till they stopped in front of an elevator. The elevator doors slid open, revealing an empty, mirror-lined interior. Arthur stepped in first, his eyes immediately catching the illuminated panel of buttons. His gaze traveled downward, landing on the LexCorp logo beside the lowest floor level, restricted access. He smirked. That's it, isn't it? Lex didn't answer, but his subtle shift in posture spoke volumes. Arthur didn't wait for confirmation. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the sleek black keycard his brother had given him. With a casual swipe, the red restriction light blinked green, and the elevator began its silent descent. The air grew heavier in the confined space, tension stretching between them like a drawn wire. Lex finally broke the silence, his voice measured. Where did you get that? Adam, of course. So, you already know what I'm working on. Arthur leaned against the elevator wall, arms crossed. I do. Lex's expression turned cold. Then you should understand that if you even think about interfering, the consequences will be severe for both of us. Arthur tilted his head, a smirk playing at his lips. No. Just for you. Lex's eyes flickered with irritation. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't the one dictating the pace of a conversation. Arthur turned his gaze to the descending numbers on the elevator panel. So tell me, Luther, what's the endgame here? You playing with fire just to see who burns first? Lex let out a low chuckle. Fire? No. Fire is predictable. Containable. I prefer things a little more calculated. Arthur scoffed. That's your problem, Luther. You only trust what you can control. And when something doesn't fit neatly into your schemes, you try to get rid of it. That's why you hate Superman so much. He's something you can't bend, something that exists outside of your perfect little equations. Lex's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Spare me the philosophy. You think you're different? You're here, in my building, forcing my hand, yet you talk about control like you're above it. Arthur smirked, tightening his grip through ruler's authority, making Lex stiffen. I don't need control, Luther. I just need you to open the damn doors that only you can. The elevator came to a smooth stop, a soft chime echoing through the confined space. As the doors slid open, Lex's posture stiffened, his usual composed demeanor cracking just slightly. Arthur stepped out first, taking in the massive underground lab stretching before him, a cathedral of technology bathed in sterile white light. Rows of high-tech workstations hummed with activity, glass chambers lined the walls, and complex blueprints flickered across holographic displays. The sheer scale of LexCorp's operation made even Arthur hesitate for a second. Lex exhaled sharply, stepping forward but keeping a wary eye on Arthur. His fingers twitched slightly, whether from frustration or nerves, Arthur wasn't sure. Arthur turned to him, tilting his head. Say I destroy everything here. How much do you lose? Lex's jaw clenched. His voice came low and dangerously sharp. Don't you even dare. I won't destroy it, Arthur said, his voice low but unwavering. As long as you show me Project Doomsday. Lex's thoughts raced. Doomsday, he had kept it a secret, buried deep in his underground labs, hidden even from the Justice League. And now this brash kid, this unassuming figure standing before him, knew exactly what was down here, even the very name. How? How had he figured it out? His lips curled into a faint smile, though it barely reached his eyes, a sign of his irritation. Lex kept his voice controlled, but the tension in his jaw was impossible to ignore. Why do you wish to destroy this project? From your methods, I can tell you're not like the rest of the caped wonders. Arthur's eyes flashed with a mix of amusement and something darker. Who says anything about destroying? He replied, his tone clipped. Lex raised an eyebrow, his fingers tapping on the sleek surface of a nearby console as he tried to regain his composure. Then what do you want? His voice grew sharper. More money? More power? Arthur's gaze didn't waver, his eyes glowing with the dangerous certainty of someone who had already made his choice. I want it for myself, he said, his words simple but loaded with meaning. Lex recoiled, taken aback by the sheer audacity. His mind whirled, trying to decipher what Arthur was truly after. What do you mean by that? Lex stammered, struggling to make sense of the situation. Arthur's impatience rippled through the air as he shot Lex a pointed look. Enough time wasted. Move. Lex, though clearly unsettled, didn't argue. He turned and led Arthur deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of the lab, passing by rows of metallic doors and advanced technology that hummed softly in the background. The dim lights flickered in time with the steady pulse of the equipment, amplifying the tension in the air. Eventually, they came to a massive, imposing door, its surface sleek and unmarked. The kind of door you'd expect to guard something catastrophic, something that wasn't meant to be seen by anyone. Lex swiped a keycard, the sound of the electronic lock sliding open echoing down the hallway. As the door swung open, Arthur's sharp eyes immediately focused on what lay inside. A giant, glass water tube stood in the center of the room, the faint glow from a control panel lighting up the figure inside. It was a hulking shape, suspended in liquid, a figure that could only be described as a nightmare waiting to be unleashed. Its body was massive, filled with unnatural muscle, veins bulging across the surface like some grotesque mockery of life. There were tubes and wires connected to its skin, feeding into it, keeping it in some kind of stasis. Project Doomsday. Arthur studied the creature with a cold, calculating gaze, his eyes narrowing slightly. He could almost feel the power thrumming beneath the surface. It was far from ready, Lex had been right about that. But it was undeniably alive. Lex's voice was strained as he watched Arthur approach the glass. It's not ready. Not even close. His words were firm, but there was a twinge of uncertainty in them. Arthur's gaze remained locked on the creature. But something shifted in the atmosphere, something more subtle. He tilted his head slightly, feeling a faint vibration in the air. It wasn't just the creature that was alive. There was something else, something hidden, breathing, quiet but unmistakable. His eyes snapped back to Lex, his tone sharp. You have someone else here, don't you? Lex froze, his expression flickering for just a moment before he regained his composure. What are you talking about? He said, trying to hide the sudden unease in his voice. But Arthur saw through it. Arthur's grip tightened around his sword, its blade gleaming under the sterile lab lights. His glowing eyes burned into Lex, who stood a few steps away, his usual arrogance now laced with unease. Explain. Arthur's voice was low, edged with a deadly calm as he pointed his sword toward a section of the wall, the one that had no doors, no markings, yet radiated something hidden. Lex raised his hands in a show of surrender, his voice laced with a controlled, forced patience. You're imagining things, there's nothing beyond. Arthur didn't let him finish. With a flick of his wrist, Ruler's authority surged through the air, and in an instant, Lex was yanked off his feet. His body slammed into the very wall he was trying to protect, a sharp gasp escaping him as the impact rattled the room. Before Lex could recover, Arthur lifted his other hand. This time toward Doomsday's containment tube. The reinforced glass groaned under an invisible force, fractures forming like spider webs across its surface. The fluid inside churned violently as the creature stirred. I'll break it, Arthur said, his tone emotionless. Lex's eyes widened, a rare genuine flash of panic crossing his face. He struggled against the unseen grip holding him against the wall. "You crazy bastard!" He clenched his teeth, then let out a sharp breath. "All right. All right. You win." Arthur didn't lower his hand. His expression was unreadable, but his glowing eyes remained locked onto Lex. Lex coughed, shifting uncomfortably before muttering, "I managed to capture someone. Someone who even slipped through the Justice League's radar. They couldn't find any trace of it, no evidence, nothing." Arthur's expression didn't change. He only said 2 words. "Open it." Lex hesitated. Arthur tightened his hold on both Lex and the Doomsday Tube. The glass let out a sharp crack. "Now!" Cursing under his breath, Lex finally relented. With a reluctant motion, he pressed a hidden switch embedded in the wall. A seam appeared where there was once nothing, then with a mechanical hiss, a section of the wall slid open, revealing another chamber beyond. Arthur stepped forward, sword still in hand. The air was heavy, charged, wrong. His instinct screamed at him, this was big. And then he saw her. Arthur stopped dead in his tracks. Suspended in the center of the dimly lit chamber was a large containment pod, humming softly with streaks of energy flickering along its surface. Inside, motionless, was a young woman, her body restrained by advanced restraints and sealed bindings and of course kryptonite. Her golden hair floated slightly in the zero-gravity stasis, and her flawless features were illuminated by the soft blue glow of the containment field. Arthur barely processed the readings flashing on the screen beside the pod. The name written there wasn't needed. He knew exactly who this was. Kara Zor-El, Supergirl. Arthur exhaled slowly, his mind racing. Lex had captured her? Hidden her so well that even the Justice League hadn't found her? Lex's voice broke the silence. "I take it you recognize her?" Arthur didn't look at him. His fingers clenched around the hilt of his sword, his jaw tightening. Lex, ever the opportunist, continued. "Do you have any idea how hard it was to get my hands on an actual Kryptonian? Let alone keep her hidden? The League has been looking for her for some time now. And yet, here she is." He let out a smug chuckle. "It's not that they never suspected me, of course I simply was 5 steps ahead." Arthur turned his gaze to him slowly, his expression unreadable. But in that moment, Lex felt something different, something colder than before. Lex pressed on, sensing an opportunity. "Think about it, Arthur. A Kryptonian. Under your control. You want power? There's nothing more powerful than having a living, breathing Kryptonian as your asset. Imagine the possibilities. What I can create. I can make you even strong." Arthur moved so fast that Lex didn't even see it. In a blink, his sword was at Lex's throat. The billionaire froze, his smirk vanishing. Arthur's voice was calm, but his next words carried absolute finality. "Shut up." Lex swallowed hard, realizing he may have seriously miscalculated. Arthur stood motionless, eyes locked onto Kara's restrained form. The soft blue glow of the stasis field reflected off his blade, his grip tightening around the hilt. Then, without looking away, he raised his hand. Blade. A shadow rippled beside him, and from it emerged a tall, dark-cloaked figure, his deadliest shadow soldier. Blade stood silently, his eerie, glowing eyes scanning the chamber. Arthur gave a simple order. "Destroy every camera here." Blade didn't immediately act. Instead, his head turned slightly, scanning the room with a cold, calculating gaze. A fraction of a second later, he moved. A series of precise gunshots echoed through the chamber, each shot finding its mark. Sparks erupted from every mounted device, security feeds, sensors, monitoring systems. They were all eliminated with deadly efficiency. Lex flinched, involuntarily taking a step back as the destruction unfolded before him. Arthur didn't stop there. Another shadow rippled, followed by a wave of darkness as more of his demons emerged, hulking, monstrous figures with gleaming eyes and claws sharper than steel. Arthur pointed at Kara's restraints. "Tear everything apart." His demons bowed in unison before lunging forward. With terrifying strength, they ripped and shredded at the metal bindings, their claws effortlessly carving through what should have been unbreakable material. The sealed locks cracked and buckled under the sheer force. Sparks and energy flickered wildly as they dismantled the containment unit, inch by inch. Lex's composure shattered. He took another step back, mouth opening as if to protest, but the sight before him rendered him speechless. This wasn't normal. This wasn't natural. This was something beyond his calculations. Arthur finally turned his gaze to him, eyes glowing with an almost amused disdain. "I'd say it's impressive that you even managed to capture her," Arthur mused, tilting his head slightly. His tone wasn't mocking, if anything, it was eerily neutral. "But then again, it's you, and you're a sick bastard." Lex gritted his teeth, his mind racing for a way out of this situation. The moment the last restraint shattered, Arthur kicked the glowing shard of kryptonite far across the lab, sending it clattering into the darkness. The sickly green glow flickered and faded. One of his shadow soldiers, a towering demon, stepped forward, carefully lifting Kara's unconscious form in its arms. Arthur studied her, his expression unreadable. Too easy. His gut told him something was wrong. Then, it happened. A sudden gasp, sharp, ragged, and filled with unrestrained fury. Kara's eyes snapped open, blazing, burning red. The entire room trembled. A shockwave exploded outward, hurling the shadow soldier carrying her across the lab like a ragdoll. It slammed into the wall with enough force to leave a deep crater before disintegrating into smoke. Arthur barely had time to react before Kara was already on him. "Who are you?" "Where am I?" she screamed, her voice raw with rage and confusion. Her fist rocketed toward his face. He barely managed to shift his stance, bringing his sword up just in time to absorb the brunt of the impact. The sheer force sent him skidding backward, his boots carving deep grooves into the lab's metallic floor. Another shockwave. The walls cracked. Machinery shattered. Alarms wailed. Arthur clenched his jaw. This was bad. His shadow soldiers rushed forward, moving to restrain her. Kara saw them, and reacted instantly. Her heat vision ignited, two beams of pure destruction lancing through the air. The first soldier vanished in smoke before it even reached her. The second lunged, only to be grabbed mid-air and driven headfirst into the ground with earth-shaking force. Arthur cursed under his breath. She wasn't thinking. She was running purely on instinct, rage, confusion, and fear. And he was the enemy. "Damn it, Kara!" Arthur growled, gripping his sword tightly as he barely dodged another wild punch, her strikes coming at him with the speed of a lightning storm. "You need to." She didn't listen. She wasn't hearing him. In a blinding blur, she was on him again, this time aiming straight for his throat. Arthur gritted his teeth. There was no more time for words. His sword whipped upward, the edge gleaming under the flickering lights. Steel met steel. A moment of stillness, then the air cracked apart as their collision sent another shockwave rippling through the lab. And in the chaos, Lex Luthor smirked. With Arthur distracted, the king of Metropolis turned on his heel and ran. Arthur snarled as he raised his hand, willing the force of ruler's authority to wrap around Kara and bind her in place. Nothing. Her body tensed for half a second, muscles straining, but then a crack. She shattered through it, breaking free as if his ability was nothing but a weak thread trying to restrain a hurricane. Arthur's eyes narrowed. Figures. Kara blurred toward him, fist cocked back, the sheer pressure behind her charge bending the steel floor beneath her feet. Arthur didn't hesitate. He threw the nearest thing within reach, a computer console the size of a desk. It slammed into her face, barely slowing her down. "Blade, take her attention!" The elite Knight Shadow Soldier responded instantly. Two sleek, black handguns materialized in Blade's hands, and he unloaded on her, his arms a blur as round after round pelted against her indestructible body. The bullets pinged off her like raindrops on steel. Kara glared, heat vision crackling in her eyes, and before Arthur could warn him, she moved. In one swift motion, she snatched Blade by the throat, lifted him off the ground, and then, boom! She slammed him into the ground with the force of a meteor impact, the entire lab quaking from the blow. Blade's form shattered into smoke, dissipating instantly. Arthur sighed. Yeah, it's a waste of mana to keep letting them regenerate against her. This isn't gonna end well. Kara didn't wait. She charged again, her expression a mix of rage and confusion. Arthur dodged. Barely. Her fist missed his jaw by an inch, the wind pressure alone making his ears ring. Arthur ducked low and retaliated, a brutal kick to the ribs. His boot connected with a satisfying impact, sending Kara skidding backward, but she barely reacted. No hesitation. She attacked. Arthur met her in midair, twisting his body and slamming a heavy elbow strike into her stomach. For a brief second, her face twisted in pain, then she recovered instantly, grabbed his wrist, and boom. Her punch smashed into his chest like a battering ram, sending him flying across the lab. Arthur's back hit something massive and glass-like. Crack. He barely had time to register the cold liquid rushing over his shoulders before the entire containment tank behind him exploded. A guttural growl rumbled from behind him. Arthur blinked. He slowly turned his head and stared. Inside the now shattered containment unit, something shifted. A hulking, monstrous figure, covered in bone spikes and pulsing muscle, stirred inside the broken chamber. Arthur let out a slow breath. Great! Arthur groaned as he pushed himself off the ground, his muscles aching from the hit. He reached for his sword, its cold steel reassuring in his grip, and took a slow breath. This is bad. This was not part of the plan. He flicked his gaze toward Kara, who was already bracing for another attack, her fists clenched, eyes burning with raw power. Arthur narrowed his eyes. All right, enough Kara Zor-El. He held up a hand, voice steady. We need to stop playing around. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, just enough time for him to continue. I don't want to fight you, he said, keeping his stance calm, unwavering. I mean you no harm. Her breathing was ragged, her body still tense from combat. The confusion in her eyes battled against the adrenaline-fueled rage she had woken up with. Arthur could see it, the flicker of doubt. For a moment, he thought he had reached her. Then her expression hardened. She lunged. Arthur stood his ground. Kara's fist shot forward, aiming directly for his face, a blow strong enough to break mountains. But Arthur didn't move. Not a single step. At the last second, mere millimeters away from his nose, she stopped. The air crackled between them, her fist hovering so close he could feel the heat radiating off of it. Her breath hitched, the fury in her eyes flickering into uncertainty. Why aren't you fighting back? She finally asked, her voice low, wary. Arthur exhaled slowly. Because I don't need to, now calm down Kara. Then, without breaking eye contact, he slowly lifted his hand and pointed over her shoulder. Kara's brows furrowed, but she followed his gesture. Behind her, the shattered remains of the containment chamber hissed as smoke and coolant spilled across the floor. And then, a monstrous snarl cut through the tension. The shadows shifted. The ground trembled. Then, slowly massive, bony fingers gripped the edges of the broken containment unit. A pair of burning red eyes snapped open. Arthur tightened his grip on his sword. We have a bigger problem. Arthur tightened his grip on his sword as the beast in front of him stirred, muscles twitching beneath thick, pale grey skin. Doomsday's deep, guttural growl echoed through the lab, a sound that sent a primal warning through the air. The containment fluids dripped from his massive form, steam rising as the monster shifted, slowly awakening. Arthur exhaled sharply. That thing isn't at full strength yet. His eyes flicked toward Kara, who was still tense, fists clenched. Shit, she's still processing. Arthur didn't have time for this. I was planning to end him while he was still slumbering, he muttered. But you decided to try the alternative. Kara scowled, still looking between Arthur and the monstrosity in front of them. I still have no idea who you are or why I'm even here. Arthur didn't look at her. His gaze remained locked on Doomsday. Name's Arthur. Kara's expression darkened, her brows knitting together. Great. That doesn't explain anything. Arthur sighed, side-eyeing her. You were captured by Lex. We're in one of his hidden labs. For a moment, Kara didn't react. But then, realization flashed in her eyes, her breath catching in her throat. Captured, she echoed, her voice lower now. By Lex. Arthur glanced at her again. I take it that's not ringing any bells. Kara's jaw tightened, her fingers twitching at her sides. The last thing I remember. She trailed off, eyes narrowing as she dug through hazy memories. She stopped, blinking rapidly. I was somewhere, Metropolis? Maybe Gotham? I don't know, it's all fuzzy. Then, I just remember falling unconscious for some reason. Arthur didn't look surprised. Figures. He probably drugged you, kept you contained here, away from the League's eyes. Kara's fists tightened at her sides. Her breathing was heavier now, frustration creeping in. How did you find me? She demanded, turning fully toward him. Arthur finally looked at her, his expression flat, unreadable. I didn't. Kara blinked. What? Arthur exhaled, eyes flicking back to the hulking, barely conscious Doomsday. I came here for this thing, he admitted. You just happened to be collateral damage. Kara stared at him. Arthur wasn't sure what she'd expected, some noble rescue mission? A heartfelt declaration that he'd gone through hell just to save her? That wasn't how he operated. Kara's lip curled, and for a second, it looked like she was about to punch him in the face again. But then Doomsday roared, the very foundation of the lab quaking under the force of it. Arthur raised his sword. Questions later. Kara cracked her knuckles, her blue eyes glowing with solar energy as she lifted off the ground slightly. She looked at Arthur. I really don't like you. Arthur smirked. Good. Then empty your frustration on that thing. Doomsday lunged. The lab shook as the monstrous creature lunged, claws tearing through the air like serrated blades. Arthur barely had time to react before he twisted away, the force of the strike carving a deep gouge into the reinforced steel floor. Kara shot upward, avoiding the debris as it rained down, her eyes already burning red-hot with energy. Arthur gritted his teeth. All right then, big guy, let's see what you can take. His Promethean sword gleamed under the cold lab lights, and with a flash of bloodlust, he disappeared from Doomsday's view, reappearing behind him. With a swift, merciless arc, he swung. The blade bit deep into Doomsday's thick, pale hide, but before Arthur could carve deeper, a sickening sound filled the air. Muscles tightened. Wounds closed. Bone hardened. Arthur's next slash stopped cold, his sword scraping against what felt like reinforced steel. His eyes widened. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, Doomsday spun, his massive fist swinging. Arthur barely managed to raise his blade in time to block, but the sheer force sent him skidding back, boots carving trenches in the metallic floor. The impact sent a shockwave through the lab, knocking over equipment and shattering glass. Kara took advantage of the opening. Her heat vision blazed, twin beams of concentrated solar fury tearing through the air and slamming into Doomsday's chest. The beast staggered, flesh sizzling, then it stopped. Arthur's stomach dropped as the charred wounds began to fade, new layers of thicker, more resilient skin taking their place. Kara's expression twisted into disbelief. What? Doomsday turned toward her, unchanged. Unshaken. Arthur exhaled sharply, annoyance creeping into his voice. You were saying, Luther? This thing's not ready. Doomsday's muscles bulged, its spine ridges growing sharper. Arthur clenched his jaw. No wonder it can even kill Superman. The beast roared and lunged at Kara, swinging both arms in a devastating hammer strike. She darted away just in time, but the air tore apart from the sheer force of the blow. The floor beneath them buckled, sending shockwaves through the lab. Arthur narrowed his eyes. Fine. If strength won't cut it. He threw out a hand, and his ruler's authority lashed out, not at Doomsday, but at the environment. The remains of shattered equipment lurched into the air, metallic debris and broken machinery hurling toward the monster like 1,000 deadly projectiles. Glass, steel, and concrete smashed against its body, obscuring it in a cloud of destruction. But as the dust settled, Doomsday stood there. Unharmed. Arthur muttered, well, that's just unfair, but I assumed as much. Kara shot forward, slamming a devastating punch into the beast's jaw, the impact sending it crashing through a reinforced wall. She didn't stop, she followed through, raining blow after blow, her fists landing like meteor impacts. Arthur sprinted in, matching her assault, dodging under one of Doomsday's swipes before plunging his sword deep into its gut. For a moment, just a moment, Doomsday staggered. Arthur twisted the blade, pressing in harder. Doomsday moved. It grabbed his sword arm with unnatural speed, its grip like iron. Arthur's eyes widened before he was hurled across the room, slamming through a bank of computer terminals. Arthur! Kara called, but Doomsday was already adapting to her too. Her punches, once staggering the beast, were now barely making it flinch. Arthur groaned, pushing himself up from the wreckage. This bastard is learning as we fight. Kara gritted her teeth, backing up slightly. What do we do? Doomsday snarled, its massive form rippling with adapting muscle and regenerating wounds. Every attack they had landed had worked once, but never again. Arthur clenched his fists, feeling the ache of his bruised knuckles. Kara wiped blood from the corner of her mouth. Arthur exhaled sharply. We punch harder. And we don't use the same attack twice. Kara glanced at him, her blue eyes burning. You sure you can keep up? Arthur smirked despite the pain in his ribs. Try me. Arthur launched forward first, ducking under a wild swing from Doomsday's massive arm. His footwork was precise, unpredictable, like a street brawler with the instincts of a predator. He threw a sharp uppercut, not to hurt, but to distract. At the same time, he extended his hand, his sword flew through the air, spinning like a saw blade, its strength increasing with Arthur's own intent, controlled by ruler's authority. Doomsday roared, swinging at Arthur, but Kara blurred into action. She twisted midair, slamming both feet into its side, sending it stumbling. Right into Arthur's sword. The Promethean blade slashed across its side, cutting deep, for now. Arthur didn't let up. The moment his feet hit the ground, he twisted, grabbed a loose steel pipe with ruler's authority, and drove it straight into Doomsday's exposed side. It didn't pierce his flesh, and the creature barely reacted. Kara followed up, her fist glowing with solar energy as she struck Doomsday's face, shattering bone. Arthur moved in again, pivoting, grabbing another heavy piece of debris, and slamming it into the beast's knee, forcing it to stagger. They were flowing together now, Arthur weaving around Kara's raw power, and Kara adapting to Arthur's calculated assaults. But Doomsday was adapting faster. Arthur noticed it first. His blade, which had carved through its flesh minutes ago, now barely scratched its skin. Kara's heat vision, which had once burned it, now seemed to do nothing. Doomsday swung at Arthur with unnatural speed. While he managed to slip under it, but the wind pressure sent him skidding back, crashing into debris. Kara shot forward, but this time, Doomsday anticipated her. Its fist caught her mid-air, sending her smashing through the lab wall. Arthur's stomach twisted at the sound of impact. She didn't get up immediately. Arthur wiped the blood from his lips. His vision blurred, but his mind was sharp. He gritted his teeth. This thing was supposed to be unfinished. Then it hit him. Lex hadn't lied. It wasn't ready, although it was strong. It is still not the actual Doomsday. Which meant Arthur's eyes flickered to the corner of the room, to the glowing green rock lying where he had kicked it away earlier. He clenched his fist. Kara, stay away. Arthur clenched his fist, his breath ragged as the kryptonite shot into his hand with a sharp pull of ruler's authority. But he didn't just hold it, he twisted steel around the glowing green shards, forging a crude, jagged gauntlet. The kryptonite pulsed against his skin, radiating something primal and deadly. He had a monster to kill. Doomsday lurched forward, its monstrous roar shaking the ruined lab. Arthur met it head-on. He slammed his kryptonite-wrapped fist into Doomsday's gut, the impact sending shockwaves through the room. The beast staggered, its regeneration faltering for the first time. Arthur didn't let up. He spun, twisting his body like a coiled spring, and drove his boot straight into its ribs. Crack! Doomsday reeled back, a sound somewhere between a snarl and a gasp escaping its throat. Arthur grinned through the blood in his mouth. It felt that. The monster tried to recover, swinging wildly, but Arthur slipped under its attack. His movements were sharp, unpredictable. Every punch, every kick, devastating. Kryptonite cut through Doomsday's flesh like it was nothing. The creature's once unstoppable healing factor slowed, not stopping, but lagging. Arthur saw the shift in its eyes. For the first time, Doomsday hesitated. That's right, bastard. I can hurt you. He dodged another strike, twisted mid-air, and brought his fist crashing down onto its skull. The kryptonite lace steel shattered against its hide, but the impact sent Doomsday staggering to one knee. Then, Kara blurred past him. She tackled Doomsday from behind, her arms locking around its massive torso. Arthur turned, eyes blazing. I said stay away, are you sure about this? I'm holding kryptonite right next to you. Kara's grip tightened. She grimaced through the pain, her breathing shallow but determined. Just do it, fast. Arthur didn't hesitate. He grabbed the twisted, glowing gauntlet and slammed it straight into Doomsday's throat. The monster choked, its body convulsing violently as the kryptonite burned from the inside out. Its roars turned into gargled, distorted screams. Arthur reached for his sword. Promethean gleamed under the flickering lights, the blade humming with raw power. With every ounce of strength left in his body, he drove the sword into Doomsday's chest, straight into its heart. It barely pierced at first. Arthur grit his teeth. His arms trembled. His vision blurred. But he pushed. The veins in his arms bulged. His eyes glowed blue, fury and power surging through him as he let out a primal roar. As the sword finally sank to its hilt, he locked eyes with the monster. Doomsday shuddered violently. Its monstrous limbs jerked, reaching, clawing at the weapon buried in its heart. But it was too late. Kryptonite pulsed through its veins. Prometheum tore into its core. Arthur's voice was thick with bloodlust as he activated it as well. With that final command, he twisted the blade inside the beast's heart, sinking it deeper. Doomsday groaned, but it couldn't move, couldn't escape. Arthur stood still, his glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. He gritted his teeth, feeling every shred of his willpower snapping into place as he watched the once invincible creature eyes start to fade. And then everything went still. Kara, panting, let go of Doomsday's body, her own strength finally failing her. And then, in that final moment, Doomsday fell, its monstrous frame crashing to the ground. The fury in its eyes faded. Then, with a final, lifeless shudder, it collapsed at Arthur's feet. The kryptonite slipped from Arthur's grasp, rolling across the floor. Doomsday, the unstoppable force, the ultimate weapon, lay lifeless. Arthur groaned, forcing himself up, his entire body screaming in pain. His vision swam. Blood dripped from his lips, his fingers, his side. He stumbled toward the kryptonite, barely managing to lift his foot, and kicked it away from Kara. Arthur stood there, shoulders rising and falling with every exhausted breath, his vision slightly blurred from the fight. That! He let out a shaky breath, wiping the blood from his mouth. That was not my plan. Kara, still catching her breath, ran a hand through her disheveled blonde hair. Finally, it's over. Arthur turned his gaze to the lifeless husk of Doomsday. His jaw tightened. I'm not sure. Kara blinked, then frowned. What do you mean by that? Arthur studied the corpse, his instincts whispering a warning. I don't think this thing stays dead for long. Kara stepped forward, staring at the unmoving monster. What? Arthur exhaled slowly. I'm not sure, but I think it can resurrect. Could take minutes, hours, days. Depends. I could be wrong. Arthur lowered himself to one knee beside Doomsday's corpse, his fingers hovering just above its thick, scarred chest. His eyes flickered with an eerie glow. But first, he pressed his palm against its cooling skin, the dark energy of his shadow monarch powers surging through him. His eyes glowed blue, his aura darkening as he whispered the word, "Arise." Nothing happened. Arthur's eyes narrowed. His power had never failed before. Not once. Kara crossed her arms, raising an eyebrow. What exactly are you doing? Arthur didn't answer immediately. His fingers twitched slightly against Doomsday's chest. Why didn't it work? He muttered under his breath, I never had to concentrate to use this before. He clenched his jaw. This thing is strong. Stronger than me. He exhaled, letting the frustration go. Fine. If one try wasn't enough, he'd force it. Arthur's eyes blazed, and the shadows in the room thickened, stretching unnaturally. Arise. The moment the word left his lips, the shadows beneath the beast shuddered. Black tendrils of pure darkness slithered from within Doomsday's form, writhing and twisting like living things. The massive body remained motionless, but from the deep cracks in its armor, an abyssal light pulsed. The shadows surged, trying to break free. A low, unnatural rumble echoed through the lab, as if the corpse itself was rejecting the process. Arthur felt it, an immense force resisting him, stronger than anything he had ever tried to claim before. But even as the shadows swirled violently, clawing to take hold, they suddenly collapsed. Shadow extraction failed. 2/3 attempts used. Arthur's breathing was heavy. Sweat dripped down his brow. Kara's eyes darted between him and the unmoving corpse. Arthur, what the hell was that? Arthur didn't answer again. His fingers curled into a fist, his eyes glowing even brighter. One more time, he muttered. This time, he let everything go, every ounce of will, every fragment of control. He shut out the world, feeling only the crushing weight of his own authority pressing down on Doomsday's remains. Arise. The shadows erupted. A violent surge of darkness tore through the corpse like a storm breaking free from a cage. The ground beneath them cracked as an abyssal aura expanded outward. Doomsday's massive form remained lifeless, but from within, the shadow broke free. a hulking figure of pure black rose from the depths of the monster's own corpse. Towering, massive, its jagged form still bore the monstrous features of the creature it was minutes ago, but now it knelt. The mighty beast, the destroyer of worlds, bowed before its new master. Arthur's lips curled into a slow, triumphant smirk. Wow, the power I'm sensing from this shadow soldier. It was overwhelming, unlike anything he had ever extracted before. Kara staggered back, eyes wide in disbelief. No way. She pointed at the shadow, then at Arthur, then back again. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. You turn the dead into one of your summons. Arthur didn't respond right away. He simply watched her, his gaze calm, unreadable, waiting to see what she would do next. She swallowed hard, glancing at the kneeling monster, then back at him. So the ones I fought earlier, they were also dead creatures. Arthur sighed, rolling his shoulders. You could say that. Kara ran a hand through her hair, exhaling sharply. That's insane. What even are you? Arthur smirked. Your savior. Kara scoffed, shaking her head. That's one way to put it. But before she could say anything else, she suddenly staggered, dropping to one knee as she clutched her head. A sharp inhale escaped her lips. Arthur frowned. You need rest. You've been locked up here for some time apparently. I don't know what Lex did to you, but we should leave. That's when they heard it, the sound of approaching people. Lots of them. Arthur's eyes narrowed as he tilted his head slightly, listening. Kara barely had time to react before Arthur's arms wrapped around her. In one swift motion, Arthur scooped her up, pulling her against his chest with ease. Her breath hitched. His grip was firm but careful, his closeness sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. Don't panic, he murmured, his voice lower, closer than before. Kara's face heated. I'm not. Then, his deep, piercing blue eyes lit up. Exchange. The world around them vanished. The world stabilized once more, the glow of LexCorp's lab replaced by the softer, ambient light of Arthur's home. The air smelled different, clean, familiar, safe. The tension of battle lingered in Kara's muscles, but exhaustion weighed heavier. She swayed slightly, her legs weak beneath her. Where are we? She asked, her voice laced with fatigue. Arthur exhaled, rolling his shoulders. My house. Jump City. He glanced at her from the corner of his eye. You can rest here. Fly off when you're good to go. Kara straightened immediately, stubborn pride kicking in. I'm totally fine. Arthur arched a brow. Are you sure? She smirked, squaring her shoulders. Absolutely. He nodded. All right then. Then he punched her in the face. Not a tap. Not a playful jab. A full-force right hook. Kara stumbled back, eyes wide. Ouch! What the hell was that for? Arthur shook out his fist. Damn, that actually stung. He smirked. For attacking me when I saved your ass. Kara rubbed her jaw, glaring. You punch everyone you save. Nope. Just the ones who try to kill me right after. His smirk widened. Besides, you're a Kryptonian. You can take it. Kara sighed, rolling her shoulders as if shaking off the weight of everything that had just happened. She glanced at Arthur, then looked away, rubbing the back of her neck. Hey. I'm sorry. And thanks for everything. Arthur exhaled through his nose, watching her for a moment before responding. I did what I had to do. His gaze shifted toward the window, his mind still lingering on the battle. Besides, both you and Doomsday were stronger than me. I couldn't have killed him without you. Kara tilted her head, studying him. You know, we didn't have to leave. I saw the people coming, they weren't hostile. I know who they were, Arthur cut in, his voice even. But I had to leave. Whatever happens with Doomsday now, that's their problem. Kara frowned. But you'd be a hero in their eyes. Why run? Arthur's smirk was faint, but his eyes darkened slightly. He thought about it for a moment, then muttered to himself, yeah, except my own brother took part in making that very thing I had to destroy. He turned to her, shrugging. Maybe. But I like to do things solo. Arthur stretched his shoulders, feeling the exhaustion settle in now that the adrenaline had worn off. He glanced at Kara, who still looked drained but was doing her best to hide it. Treat this place like home, he said, turning toward the hallway. Crash on the couch, raid the fridge, whatever. Just don't break anything important. Kara gave a small, tired smirk. No promises. Arthur huffed a quiet laugh and started walking away. I'm gonna get some rest. Try not to punch me in my sleep. She chuckled, shaking her head. No guarantees on that either. But thanks, Arthur. Really? He gave a half-hearted wave without looking back. Yeah. And with that, he disappeared into his room, shutting the door behind him. Arthur leaned against the door for a moment, exhaling. His body still ached, his knuckles were bruised, and his muscles felt like they had been wrung dry. But then his lips curled into a smirk. Not like a door would stop you from seeing me anyway, he muttered, glancing at the closed entrance to his room. But it doesn't matter. He turned around, and from the darkness of the room, a hulking figure loomed forward. A presence that would send most people into a blind panic, a monster that had been engineered to kill gods now, it knelt. Doomsday. Or rather, his shadow. His enormous frame bowed in absolute submission, the inky darkness of his new form rippling slightly, those glowing eyes awaiting their master's command. Arthur took a slow step forward, inspecting him with quiet satisfaction. The system message appeared before him. Name, unknown rank general. Arthur raised a brow. General, who? Figures. I didn't even name you yet, he crossed his arms, smirking. I was gonna call you something even more dramatic, but honestly. Doom is fine, so Doom it shall be. New shadow added, General Doom. The massive shadow let out a low, guttural growl, not of hostility, but of acknowledgement. Arthur exhaled sharply, placing a hand on his hip. Easily my strongest soldier, and probably will be for a long time. But damn, that was a fight. Let's see what I got out of it. You have leveled up. 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 Bloodlust level 2, state of fear for 2 minutes and reducing all of the target stats by 60%. Arthur blinked as the system spammed him with notifications. Who? That's a lot. He scrolled through, and his eyes widened slightly at the next screen. Quest completed, kill the hostile Doomsday. Failure condition, 24 hours in the penalty zone. Arthur huffed a laugh. Damn. That penalty's not even bad, just a pain in the ass. Good thing I didn't check this mid-fight. Then, his gaze landed on the real prizes. Rewards acquired Happy Smiley Doomsday's Bone Gauntlets, S-tier, indestructible claws capable of tearing through Kryptonian tier defenses. Can evolve spikes. Grants user enhanced melee combat instincts. Omega Hardened Hide Armor Set, rarity unknown. A full-body armor crafted from Doomsday's near-invulnerable corpse. Nullifies most energy attacks. Highly resistant to blunt force. Anti-Kryptonian Blood Vial, epic. A concentrated sample of Doomsday's blood. Can be used to create kryptonite-enhanced weapons. Arthur stared at the screen for a long moment before letting out a low whistle. So I can actually craft weapons now? His smirk widened. That's nice. He closed the screen and flexed his fingers. The fight had been hell, but looking at the rewards now? Totally worth it. Arthur exhaled, rolling his shoulders as he pulled up his status screen. Name, Arthur Blackwind. Job, Necromancer. Title, Bane of the Unworthy. Plus 20% attack against those who harbor evil intent. Level, 60. Fatigue, 90. HP, 1250-5100. MP, 3068-50. He whistled. Damn, that fight really did a number on me. His health bar was barely hanging on. He scrolled further, allocating his ability points. Strength, 110 to 134. Health, 98 to 111. Agility, 58 to 85. Intelligence, 130 to 143. Sense, 58 to 76. Available ability points, 30 to 0. Arthur flexed his fingers, feeling the subtle increase in power as his body adjusted to the stat boost. He had to increase his agility, which was a must after getting tossed around like a ragdoll. Passive skill, Tenacity, level 1. Job-specific skill. Shadow Extraction, Shadow Army limit, 12/60ths. Shadow Exchange. Skills, Bloodlust, level 2. Ruler's Authority. Equipment, Omega Hardened Hide, equipped. Abyss Forged Necklace, equipped. Inventory, Doomsday's Bone Gauntlets. Azarath Knight Armor Set. Greatsword of the Lowborn. Prometheum Sword. Anti-Kryptonian Blood Vial. Tower of Fate Key. Unknown Key. Arthur sighed and reached for his new armor of the Omega Hardened Hide. The second it wrapped around him, his entire body was encased in the near-indestructible remains of Doomsday. The material felt eerily light despite its insane durability. Thank God this thing can turn invisible, he muttered, or I'd look like a walking rock monster. He clenched his fist, testing the flexibility. The armor responded like a second skin, and when he tensed, a faint ripple of reinforced energy pulsed through it. Arthur smirked. Yeah, this'll do. His gaze flickered to his shadow army count. 12/60ths. For the longest time, he had been picky about his soldiers. If they weren't strong, he didn't bother getting more. I should get more soldiers, he muttered, rubbing his jaw. Doesn't matter if they're weak. Quantity's starting to look just as important as quality since I have a general now. Doom, still kneeling, let out a low, rumbling growl. Arthur chuckled. Don't get jealous. You're still gonna be the strongest. Arthur exhaled deeply, letting himself sink into the mattress. His body ached, his muscles screamed, and his mind was foggy from fatigue. The fight had pushed him to his absolute limit. If not for Kara, he probably wouldn't have made it out alive. Thank God for this skill. He muttered under his breath as his status screen flickered in his vision. Passive skill, Longevity, immune to diseases, poisons, and other harmful abilities. Regeneration speed far surpasses that of a normal human. Healing increases exponentially while sleeping. Arthur smirked tiredly. His body was already working overtime, knitting his wounds back together at an unnatural rate. The dull pain in his ribs faded slightly, and the bruises decorating his skin lost some of their deep color. His eyes burned with renewed determination as he clenched his fists. I'll go and finish business in that tower. The faintest glow of blue flickered in his irises before his exhaustion finally won, and his body went still. LexCorp Lex Luthor sat in his office, eyes burning with barely contained fury. The monitors before him flickered with security footage from one of his surviving cameras. His lab, his secret lab, now swarming with Justice League members capturing Doomsday Corps. Debris and shattered equipment lay everywhere, the aftermath of a battle far beyond what his defenses had been prepared for in a worst-case scenario. His teeth clenched so hard it hurt. How? How had it come to this? His most classified project, Doomsday, was gone. Kara Zor-El, his prized Kryptonian prisoner, had vanished. And worst of all, Arthur Blackwind. That nobody had torn through his plans like a force of nature. Luther slammed a fist against his desk, eyes blazing with rage. I can't believe this happened. That bastard ruined everything. I will burn him to the ground. I will destroy everything he has. His power, his secrets, everything. And now the Justice League is on my doorstep. How? He can't possibly be working with them. His voice echoed through the room. He breathed heavily, chest rising and falling with anger. His mind was searching for contingency plans. Through the wreckage of his schemes, he needed control. He needed a way to turn this disaster around. But then a shadow fell over him. The air in the room shifted, growing dense, suffocating. Lex's eyes snapped up. A red and blue silhouette stood at his door. The sheer presence of the person sent a chill crawling down his spine. Superman. The Kryptonian stepped forward, his expression unreadable, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Lex, he said, voice steady, absolute. You're coming with us. Justice League Watchtower. The holographic screen flickered as Cyborg played the last moments of LexCorp's security footage. A grainy but unmistakable image of Arthur Blackwind appeared, standing motionless. But what caught the League's attention wasn't just him, it was the dark, humanoid figure at his side. The shadowy entity, one of his soldiers, raised its weapon with inhuman precision. In a flash, a series of dark projectiles shot out, striking multiple security cameras before they could capture anything more. The screen went black. Silence filled the room. That's an interesting ability, Green Lantern muttered, breaking the quiet. Controlling independent fighters. More importantly, Hawkman grumbled, arms folded, who the hell is that? Cyborg leaned back, arms crossed. His name's Arthur Blackwind. Not long ago, he joined us on a mission. He gestured at the screen. I managed to track his brother all the way to Lex's building while Arthur was fighting the Titans. But somehow, he still got there. Cyborg shook his head. And before you ask, no, he's not an alien. But even I don't know what to classify him as. A moment of silence passed before Batman finally spoke. Arthur Blackwind. The room turned toward him as he continued, his voice level and precise, as if he had rehearsed the words in his head. Abilities, shadow-based necromancy. Capable of summoning and controlling creatures that act as his soldiers. Enhanced physicality. Skilled in swordsmanship and unarmed combat. Possesses an ability similar to telekinesis but limited to objects and his weapons. Has knowledge of the supernatural and mystical. Likely has an unknown form of teleportation. The room went dead silent. Green Arrow narrowed his eyes. How the hell do you already know all of this? Batman's expression remained unreadable. It's my job. Before anyone could question him further, Batman tapped a control on the table, and a new video feed replaced the black screen. This, he said, was pulled from one surviving camera. The League watched intently as the shaky footage showed Arthur and Kara fighting Doomsday. Though the angle didn't capture the full battle, the video was shaky, likely from the shockwaves of their battle. But for a brief moment, they could make out explosions of force, movements too fast for the camera to track, but it was clear enough to see the level of destruction. The ground trembled, shadows moved unnaturally, and Arthur held his ground against something that should have torn him apart. The video ended. Okay, that's definitely something, Flash said, scratching the back of his head. Dude fought that and still managed to live. Batman barely spared him a glance. That's the problem. Superman's eyes narrowed. Meaning, Batman said coolly, we still have no idea what his true intentions are. You don't gain that level of power without a goal. And I don't like mysteries. Wonder Woman leaned back in her seat. He fought against Lex and took down Doomsday. If he had ill intent, we would have seen it already. Martian Manhunter, who had remained silent, finally added, unless he is simply waiting for the right moment to do something. Superman exhaled sharply, clearly frustrated, but before he could argue further, Flash piped up, looking between them. Okay, so worst case scenario, he's a guy with a god-tier power set and a grudge against bad people like Lex. To Flash shrugged. If he wanted to be our problem, we'd know by now. Superman exhaled, arms crossed. Well, Bruce, thanks to him, at least we know Kara is safe. And we have Lex, but we can't keep him here for long. I'll extract more from Lex about his experiments. Batman's tone was cold, matter-of-fact. Flash arched a brow. You think he W? Batman didn't even look at him. He will. The weight behind his words made even Green Lantern shift uncomfortably. Superman exhaled sharply. And what about Kara, Bruce? She was with this Arthur. If she trusts him, that has to count for something. Batman, however, wasn't convinced. He steepled his fingers, eyes narrowing at the frozen image of Arthur on the screen. I'll watch him myself. Jump City. Blackwind Estate. Arthur was jolted awake, not by his own will, but by someone shaking him. His groggy eyes snapped open to see Kara standing over him, arms crossed, looking far too awake for someone who had nearly collapsed from exhaustion the night before. He blinked. Why are you waking me up? His voice was still rough with sleep. No, actually, why are you still here? Kara shrugged. Because your mother. Arthur frowned, still trying to shake off the sleep. What does that even mean? What about my Mo? Then his mind caught up. Eyes wide, he sat up straight. Wait. My mother? My actual mother saw you. Kara smirked. Yeah. Figured I'd stick around and hang out, and I came here to wake you up considering how she was looking for you. Arthur groaned, rubbing his face. Kara, I swear, if your male version shows up at my doorstep because of this, she waved him off. Relax. I already flew over to National City and came back. They know I'm back. Arthur stared at her. You left? Kara nodded. Yep. And then you came back. Another nod. Arthur sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. Why? Kara just smiled innocently. Because I wanted to. Arthur threw his head back onto the pillow. Of course you did. Before he could process anything further, a soft knock came from the door. Then, before Arthur could even tell them to wait, his mother walked in. She looked at Kara, then at Arthur, then back at Kara. A slow smile spread across her face. Oh. So this is the girl we talked about. Arthur bolted upright. No. Also, we didn't talk about any girl. Except Kara, completely unfazed, extended her hand. Hi. I'm Kara Danvers. Arthur's entire soul deflated. He pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaling sharply. You're really not helping. His mother's eye sparkled with interest. Oh, so this is serious enough for last names. Arthur whipped his head around. Excuse me. His mother ignored him, instead shaking Kara's hand warmly. It's nice to meet you, dear. I was wondering when my son would finally. Kara just grinned, clearly enjoying this. Finally what? Arthur cut her off immediately. No, his mother ignored him again, turning back to Kara. So, are you two dating, or is he still in his brooding phase? Arthur glared at her. Don't encourage her, let's just leave. As Arthur grabbed his jacket, clearly planning to leave and avoid any further awkwardness, his mother called out from the kitchen. Oh, by the way. He froze, mid-step, already regretting the moment he stepped foot back in the house. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing. What now? His mother didn't even look up from her phone as she spoke. Something happened in your brother's office. He had to head to Metropolis for some business, but he's fine, don't worry about it, just wanted to let you know. Arthur nodded, not giving away anything. His mind briefly drifted to the chaos that had unfolded in his office, the Titans, Lex. The tension. But he kept it to himself, there was no need for his mother to know about that. He wasn't sure how much he actually wanted to share, even with her. Yeah, as long as he's fine, Arthur repeated, his voice steady. He didn't want to worry her, he looked at her, shifting his focus back to the present. Anyway, I'll be heading out for school then, I'm going for some trip, might take a week for me to return, maybe more. His mother raised an eyebrow. Oh, with Kara? Arthur froze for a moment, and before he could respond, Kara was already there, understanding the unspoken tension in his expression. She quickly chimed in with a wide, innocent smile. Yes, it's a school trip, right? Arthur's face palmed in exasperation, but Kara just shot him a playful grin. His mother looked between them, her eyes narrowing for just a second, but then she shrugged and smiled. Right. Well, take care then. As his mother turned to leave, Arthur's eyes glinted with quiet determination as he discreetly extended his reach with one of his shadow soldiers, placing it in the room where it could keep a low watch over his mother, just in case. He didn't like the idea of leaving her completely unprotected, especially with everything going on. As he stepped out of the house, Arthur couldn't help but thinking about one thing in his mind. Enough wasted time. Time to hit that tower. Arthur noticed the extra footsteps following him outside the house. His eye twitched. You know you can leave now, right? He said without looking back. I already have one person stalking me. Kara, walking just a step behind him, smirked. Oh? And here I thought you'd be flattered that I want to spend time with my savior. Arthur rolled his eyes. You almost punched a hole through me, Kara. Pretty sure you didn't need saving the moment I set you free. That's not the point, she said, stepping up beside him. The point is, you saved me when no one else did. Arthur sighed. Look, I don't have time or energy for distractions right now. I've got school, then an important business trip. Kara arched an eyebrow. The school trip lie you just told your mother. Arthur deadpanned. Yes. Business. Very important, very confidential. Can't tell you. She crossed her arms. Then I'll stay. Arthur came to a halt, pinching the bridge of his nose. Of course you will. She grinned at him like she just won an argument. Arthur let out a long, exaggerated sigh before shrugging. Fine, you win. You're a Kryptonian, I can't beat you to a pulp here and then go on my way. For now. Kara snorted, covering her mouth. Wow, romance really isn't your thing, huh? Arthur ignored her and waved a dismissive hand. How about this, I'll be back in about 10 days or so. You want to hang out or whatever? Fine, we'll call it a date. The moment the words left his mouth, Kara's expression lit up. Really? Arthur regretted his life choices instantly. Yes. Before he could process what was happening, she shot up into the sky like a missile. I'll hold you to it, she yelled, her voice carrying over the wind as she disappeared into the clouds. Arthur stood there for a long moment, staring at the spot where she had just been. Then, with all the enthusiasm of a man trudging to his own execution, he muttered, "What the hell did I just do?" before continuing on his way. The final school bell rang, and Arthur wasted no time grabbing his bag and heading for the exit. The halls were crowded with students eager to leave, but Arthur weaved through them effortlessly, his mind elsewhere. As he stepped outside, he casually scanned the area. No sign of Raven or the Titans or anything unusual. Not that he expected them to show up, but still. He smirked to himself. Guess they don't care much about this. Or maybe some of them are hospitalized. He hummed in amusement at the thought. Not that he went hard on them. Shoving his hands into his pockets, he turned away from the bustling school grounds and started toward his true destination, the Tower of Fate. The farther he walked, the more the scenery changed. The neatly paved roads gave way to cracked concrete, the buildings becoming older, rougher, as he entered the slums of Jump City. Fewer streetlights worked here, casting long shadows in the alleys, making the whole place feel like something out of a crime thriller. Arthur barely paid attention. His mind was locked onto one thing, the entrance to the tower. Arthur took a deep breath. All right, let's get this over with. Then, without hesitation, he used the key and entered. The second he crossed the threshold, the system reacted. You have cleared the first 10 levels of the Tower of Fate. Would you like to teleport directly to level 11? Arthur blinked. Then smirked. Well, that's convenient, he muttered. No pointless climbing, no retracing old steps, straight to the action. He liked that. He didn't hesitate. Level 11. The moment the words left his lips, the air around him shifted. The world distorted, the very fabric of reality twisting as golden light enveloped him. His vision blurred, gravity itself seemed to bend, and before he could even take a step forward, he was already there. Level 11. Arthur's vision adjusted as the golden glow of teleportation faded, and he immediately noticed the change in scenery. The air was thick with dust, the walls damp and aged. He stood in an ancient underground labyrinth, dimly illuminated by torches flickering with unnatural blue flames. The scent of mildew and old blood clung to the air. The architecture was archaic, far older than anything he had seen before. Twisting corridors stretched out in multiple directions, lined with faded murals of figures in dark cloaks, their eyes hollow and ominous. Before he could take another step, his instinct screamed. A blur of movement. Shadows detached from the walls. Steel glinted. Arthur barely shifted before a curved blade sliced toward his throat. His ruler's authority surged, and with a mere thought, the assassin was violently hurled back like a ragdoll, crashing into the ancient stone wall with a sickening crack. TCH. Arthur's eye sharpened as more figures emerged from the darkness, at least a dozen. They were clad in tattered but deadly assassin garb, their movements eerily silent. No footsteps. No breathing. Just pure, predatory intent. Arthur moved first. The nearest assassin lunged, Arthur's Prometheum sword sliced through his midsection, the enchanted metal shearing through armor like paper. Another one aimed for his blind spot. Arthur spun, ruler's authority catching the assassin midair, snapping his wrist backward before throwing him into two others with bone-breaking force. A flurry of blades rained down from the shadows. Arthur lifted his palm, ruler's authority seized them midair. The assassins barely had a moment to react before their own weapons reversed and impaled their throats. Bodies hit the ground. Arthur exhaled, rolling his shoulders. That was annoying. His senses flared again. More. He didn't even need to turn around to know. They were watching. Waiting. Persistent bastards. Arthur cracked his neck, then without hesitation, lifted his hand. Come out. The temperature in the tunnel dropped. A thick, black mist seeped from the ground, curling unnaturally as his shadow stirred to life. Two figures emerged from the darkness beside him. One was Blade, his silent enforcer, standing with his ominous jagged sword and weapons at the ready, his eyes glinting like cold steel in the dim light. The other was a pair of his shadow demons, their bodies twisting and shifting unnaturally, barely containing their excitement at the promise of slaughter. Arthur flexed his fingers, gripping his sword. Even you guys might have trouble with this lot. He exhaled, smirking. Doom is just overkill. From the depths of the tunnels, the assassins moved in. Arthur grinned. Let's get started. By the time he reached level 20, the torches flickered, casting eerie shadows across the ancient chamber. The stench of death and decay lingered in the cold air, mixing with the faint scent of incense. The walls were lined with archaic carvings. Tales of war, conquest, and rebirth. At the center of the room, standing atop a stone dais, was a man who had lived for centuries. Raz Al Ghul. The demon's head stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his emerald eyes glinting with condescension. His dark robes, embroidered with golden patterns, barely moved in the still air. You move well, boy, Raz remarked, his voice smooth yet laced with arrogance. Efficient. Ruthless. A warrior unshackled by morality, I like that. He smirked slightly. But reckless. Short-sighted. Power without wisdom. Arthur said nothing. His eyes glowed ominously, his Promethean sword resting casually at his side. Raz took a slow step forward, his confidence unshaken. Tell me, Arthur Blackwind. Do you even understand what I'm saying? Arthur sighed. You done? Raz chuckled. You have potential. More than even the detective. But you lack purpose, and I shall. Raz's body moved like a phantom, suddenly closing the distance between them in a blur of motion. A dagger, its edge laced with poison, sliced toward Arthur's throat. Sheeing. In one impossibly fast motion, Arthur vanished from where he stood. A dark blur streaked past Raz. A gust of wind followed. For a second, nothing happened. Then Raz froze mid-sentence. His smirk twitched. His eyes widened slightly. A thin red line formed across his throat. Arthur stood behind him, his sword extended, glowing faintly with residual power. Raz opened his mouth to speak, but only blood escaped. His head slid from his shoulders. Thud. His body crumpled unceremoniously to the ground. Arthur exhaled, watching as the great Raz Al Ghul fell, his legendary immortality unable to save him this time. He kicked the severed head slightly with his boot. Weak, then he added, for a guy who talks so much about wisdom, you should have known when to shut up. With that, he turned, flicking his sword to the side, dark blood splattering against the stone floor, before walking toward the next challenge. Level 30, Arthur stepped forward, boots echoing through the abandoned ruins of the battlefield. His breathing was steady, barely labored, despite the carnage around him. At his back, Doom let out a low, guttural roar, its crimson eyes burning with menace. Beside him, Blade stood motionless, sword dripping with the blood of fallen warriors. Arthur exhaled slowly, his gaze sweeping over the lifeless bodies of Hawkman and Hawkwoman. Their once proud wings, now tattered and stained, lay broken beneath them. The battlefield had been theirs, a domain of sky and steel, but in the end, not even the heavens could save them. He rolled his shoulders, wincing slightly at the dull ache settling into his muscles. This was different. These past 10 floors had been unlike anything he had experienced before. Arthur thought back to level 21, the moment everything changed. The air had shifted, thick with an unnatural weight that pressed down on his chest. The environment was wrong. Not just a different location, but something fundamentally off. It didn't feel like Earth anymore. Gravity had changed. The sky was wrong. Instead of the endless void he was used to, he had found himself under a vast expanse of deep crimson clouds, swirling and shifting as if alive. The air crackled with energy that wasn't quite magic, but something else entirely. The terrain had stretched unnaturally, like a warped reflection of reality, filled with structures that seemed too alien to belong to any civilization he knew. And then came the warriors. Not mindless monsters, not hollow shells conjured to test him. They were FrenzyArens. At first, he had dismissed them as just another wave of enemies, until their weapons clashed against his armor, and he realized they were almost real. They bled. They screamed. They felt fear. The battle had been brutal. A sky full of warriors descending like a storm, their nth metal weapons singing through the air, striking with the weight of entire worlds. But they had never fought someone like him. Arthur had carved through their ranks, shadow soldiers following his every command, tearing through the battlefield with merciless precision. Blade moved like a wraith, silent and swift, his strikes almost artistic in their brutality. Doom, on the other hand, Doom was carnage incarnate. Arthur had watched, arms crossed, as his unstoppable general ripped through entire squadrons, crushing warriors in his massive jaws, his roars shaking the very foundation of this realm. Then came the last stand. Hawkman and Hawkwoman. He had expected more. Their tenacity was admirable, they fought as warriors should. Hawkman's rage was like a wildfire, every swing of his mace carrying the weight of vengeance. Hawkwoman moved like the wind, graceful, precise, deadly. But even legends fall. In the end, Arthur stood above them, their wings broken, bodies still. The battlefield was eerily silent, save for the distant rumbling growl of doom. Blade, still holding his sword at the ready, tilted his head slightly. This shadow still might be a bit overkill for these lower levels. Arthur muttered, glancing at Doom. The massive beast huffed, almost as if he was saying that this was the norm for him. Arthur sighed, rolling his neck. Something wasn't right. The FrenzyArens had felt real. Their weapons, their tactics, their emotions. His eyes narrowed. A theory had started forming in his mind, but he needed confirmation. Level 31 would tell him everything. Arthur barely had time to react before the world around him shifted violently. The moment he set foot in level 31. One moment, he was surrounded by the eerie ruins of the last battlefield, his boots still wet with FrenzyAren blood. The next, he was drowning. Or at least, that's what his instincts screamed. Darkness engulfed him. Heavy, unrelenting pressure crushed down on his body as icy water wrapped around him like a suffocating cocoon. Panic spiked through his mind for a split second, his body tensing, preparing to fight his way back to the surface. Except, there was no surface. Arthur's blue glowing eyes snapped open, their hue cutting through the abyss as he scanned his surroundings. His lungs, expected to burn with the lack of oxygen, remained steady. His body moved fluidly, his strength and speed unhindered despite the crushing depth of the ocean around him. Something wasn't right. His gaze flickered as a blue screen materialized before him. Due to the unique mana of the Shadow Monarch, you are able to breathe, move, and fight underwater indefinitely, so long as mana is available. Current remaining mana duration, for hours. Arthur blinked, then scowled. Well, isn't that convenient? He exhaled, watching as a trail of bubbles floated upward, endlessly. His gaze followed them, but he couldn't see the surface. Nothing but an endless abyss. His jaw clenched. What the hell is going on? Why am I in the depths of the goddamn ocean? The silence of the deep was his only answer. His grip tightened around the hilt of his sword before he let out a slow, measured breath, forcing himself to focus. For hours. That's all the time he had before the system decided he could no longer breathe. Well, no use wasting time. His aura flared, casting long shadows through the ocean depths as he stretched out a hand. Come out. No slacking off. Spread out, kill anything that moves. With those words, the darkness itself rippled. Emerging from the void, his soldiers took shape, twisted silhouettes of death, their eyes glowing ominously in the dark waters. Blade materialized at his side, his sword gleaming with eerie brilliance, while Doom let out a guttural growl, sending a shockwave through the water. And then, they moved. Arthur had figured out the truth after the first wave of enemies. The moment they appeared, clad in ornate Atlantean armor, their tridents glistening like deep-sea spears, he had known. The garbled words they shouted were clear enough despite the water. Intruder. An outsider dares invade Atlantis. That had been all he needed. The fight wasn't long. It couldn't be. Arthur didn't have time to waste on soldiers who didn't matter. His sword cut through them like a blade through butter, and his soldiers followed, merciless and efficient. Shadows drifted through the water like spectral reapers, tearing through the city's warriors with inhuman precision. And now, with 1 hour remaining, Arthur stood before the final gate, the heart of Atlantis. A massive, ominous castle loomed before him, its golden spires glowing faintly in the dark waters. The remains of shattered guards floated lifelessly around him, their weapons drifting aimlessly in the currents. Arthur didn't even glance at them. His eyes were locked ahead, where the grand throne of Atlantis awaited its king. Instead, he found something else. Arthur exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. Well, this is a disappointment. He tilted his head, letting out a dry chuckle as he casually raised his Prometheum sword. I was half expecting Aquaman. His grip tightened. Not his pathetic, jealous brother. A cold silence filled the throne room. The faint glow of Atlantean torches flickered in the deep, casting eerie shadows that danced across the ruined hall. The water trembled. Not from a current, but from something far more ominous. Ocean Master stood at the throne steps, his eyes burning with rage and defiance. He gripped his trident tighter, his ornate armor gleaming with a regal sheen. Then, they appeared. From the abyssal dark behind Arthur, two figures emerged. First was Blade, the shadow-cloaked assassin whose very presence exuded lethal precision. His black sword, his cold, calculating eyes locked onto the false king, his stance coiled like a viper ready to strike. Then came Doom. A beast of shadow and steel. His form was massive, oppressive, his guttural growl reverberated through the water, sending shockwaves that cracked the marble beneath them. They stood behind Arthur, silent executioners, waiting for their monarch's command. One word, and they would erase Ocean Master from existence. But the command never came. Cheeing. Arthur's Prometheum sword shot out, slicing through the water like a blade through silk. It didn't aim for Ocean Master. Instead, it cut directly in front of Blade and Doom, halting them in their tracks. Their glowing eyes flickered in surprise. Arthur didn't turn to them. His voice was calm, but laced with an edge of amusement. No. The word hung heavy in the water, carrying an undeniable authority. Arthur tilted his head slightly, his eyes gleaming. I want to enjoy this fight. A beat of silence. Then, Blade lowered his weapon. Doom let out a low, guttural sound, his monstrous shoulders relaxing. Arthur smirked. I had a mana handicap, yet you two were very efficient. Well done. The weight of his words sank in, and for the first time since appearing, Blade and Doom knelt. Not because they had to. Not out of obligation. But because they had earned the rarest thing from their monarch, praise. Arthur chuckled softly. They didn't defeat you once, so I didn't lose any mana. The two shadows remained bowed before him for a moment longer, then without a word, faded into Arthur's own shadow. Arthur finally turned his full attention to Ocean Master. A slow smirk curled at his lips as he rolled his shoulders, raising his sword once more. Now, he said, his voice carrying an unmistakable edge of excitement. Let's make this a little more fun than the previous fights. The waters shook. Arthur vanished. A sudden explosion of force sent a shockwave rippling through the throne room, the sheer speed of his movement distorting the water around him. Before Ocean Master could even react, Arthur was already in front of him, his Promethean sword gleaming like a crescent of death. Clang! Ocean Master barely raised his trident in time to block, but the sheer impact sent him hurtling back, slamming into a coral-carved pillar that shattered on impact. Arthur didn't wait. He flashed forward again, his glowing eyes locked onto his prey. His sword lashed out in a blur, every strike carrying a lethal precision. Ocean Master gritted his teeth, parrying with desperate efficiency, but Arthur was toying with him. His footwork, his speed, his unpredictable mix of techniques making it impossible for Ocean Master to find an opening. Then, with a flick of his fingers, Arthur used Ruler's authority. A sudden, invisible force yanked Ocean Master forward, right into Arthur's fist. Boom! The impact rippled through the water like a detonation. Ocean Master choked, his head snapping back violently as Arthur's fist buried itself into his gut, sending shockwaves of power coursing through his body. Arthur tilted his head, smirking. "You're slowing down." Ocean Master snarled. Despite the pain, he spun his trident and lashed out, aiming for Arthur's ribs. Arthur leaned back effortlessly, dodging the strike by inches. He grabbed the trident with Ruler's authority, halting its movement mid-swing. Ocean Master's eyes widened. Arthur casually let go and slammed his foot into Ocean Master's chest, sending him skidding across the seafloor. Ocean Master gritted his teeth, glaring at Arthur. "You arrogant brat." He suddenly twirled his trident, channeling his Atlantean magic into it. The water around them shifted violently, forming into a spiraling vortex of condensed pressure. Arthur's smirk only grew. With a single throw, Ocean Master hurled his trident, a blur of violet and silver streaking toward Arthur like a missile. The sheer speed of it sent a shockwave through the ocean, enough force to skewer even a metahuman. But Arthur was faster. Whoosh! He shifted slightly, letting the trident whistle past his face. His glowing eyes locked onto it mid-flight, and with a subtle raise of his fingers Ruler's authority took hold. The trident stopped. It hung in the water for a split second, quivering from the force behind the throw. Then, it reversed. Right back at you. Arthur launched it back at insane speeds, the weapon now under his complete control. Ocean Master barely had time to react. His own trident impaled his thigh, sending a burst of crimson into the water. He grunted in pain, his breath ragged as he staggered, looking down at the weapon lodged in his leg. Arthur approached, his sword resting on his shoulder as he gave a slow, almost lazy grin. "I intentionally avoided a fatal strike." He gestured at the trident embedded in Ocean Master's thigh. "It'd be a shame to end you with your own weapon." Ocean Master snarled but couldn't hide the flicker of fear in his eyes. Arthur cracked his neck, rolling his shoulders. "Now then." He lifted his sword, eyes burning with pure dominance. "Shall we continue?" Ocean Master gritted his teeth, yanking his own trident out of his bleeding leg. The water around him boiled with his fury, his Atlantean magic causing violent currents to spiral around them. "You think you're invincible just because you got a few lucky strikes in?" Ocean Master growled, twirling his trident with expert precision. The pressure in the water intensified, the weight of the ocean pushing against Arthur like a collapsing mountain. Arthur simply cracked his neck, unbothered. "Lucky? Now." He raised his free hand, fingers curling. Ruler's authority activated. The pressure vanished instantly, like it had never been there. Ocean Master's eyes widened. Arthur vanished. Boom! In an instant, Arthur was above him, blade flashing down. Ocean Master barely blocked in time, but the sheer force sent him crashing into the seafloor, leaving a crater of broken stone and ancient coral. Arthur didn't let up. He darted forward, his Promethean sword a silver blur in the abyss. Ocean Master, despite his pain, fought back with the grace of a war-hardened Atlantean. He twisted his trident, expertly maneuvering in the water, countering Arthur's strikes with precise parries. But it wasn't enough. Arthur was simply too fast and too strong. His combat style wasn't rigid like Ocean Master's. He mixed everything: swordplay, unarmed combat, ruler's authority, and sheer brute force. Ocean Master lunged, aiming for Arthur's chest. Arthur ducked under the strike, grabbing Ocean Master's wrist mid-motion. A flick of his fingers crack. Ocean Master's wrist snapped. The warlord roared in pain, but Arthur wasn't done. He spun, using his momentum to slam his elbow into Ocean Master's jaw. The force was enough to send him spiraling backward, blood trailing in the water. Arthur exhaled sharply, his glowing eyes locked onto his opponent. "You're a bit tough, I'll give you that," he admitted. "But you should have figured it out by now." Ocean Master glared, still holding his shattered wrist. "Figured out what?" Arthur raised his sword, letting the abyssal glow of the ocean reflect off its sharp edge. "That you never stood a chance." He thrust his palm forward. Ruler's authority flared to life. Ocean Master suddenly couldn't move. His limbs locked in place as an invisible force seized his entire body. His eyes widened in horror as he felt himself being dragged forward straight towards Arthur. Arthur waited. Then, with one devastating swing, he bisected Ocean Master clean through the chest. The warlord didn't even have time to scream. His body split apart, blood and entrails dispersing into the dark ocean as his life ended in a single, brutal instant. Arthur exhaled. His sword hummed with an eerie glow as the remains of Ocean Master drifted lifelessly in the abyss. Then, system notification, level 40 complete. You may proceed to the next level or exit the tower. He sheathed his sword and floated in the abyss, thinking. The first 10 floors were filled with unpredictable, borderline insane enemies. Lunatics and freaks who moved without pattern. Assassins came next, testing his ability to react under constant ambushes and stealth attacks. Then came the Hawk people. Fighters who dominated the skies, forcing him to battle in midair, dealing with speed, aerial combat, and advanced weaponry. And now? The depths of the ocean. Atlanteans, pressure changes, water physics, stamina limitations. His eyes narrowed slightly. "I get it now," he murmured. "You're not just throwing enemies randomly at me for the sake of it, are you?" He looked up, the abyss stretching infinitely above him. "You're preparing me." The tower wasn't just giving him stronger opponents. It was forcing him to adapt. To fight in every possible environment, against every possible kind of enemy. It wasn't just about power. It was about mastery. Arthur's smirk slowly returned. "Fine. I'll play your game." Without hesitation, he clenched his fist. Next floor. The moment Arthur stepped in level 41, the air around him was hot and suffocating. The ground beneath him was an endless sea of shifting sand dunes, stretching far beyond what his eyes could see. The sky above had an eerie, dark orange hue, as if it were perpetually on the cusp of a storm, but the winds barely stirred the desert. It was a vast, desolate wasteland, the kind that could drive anyone insane with its emptiness, but Arthur remained grounded. He squinted into the distance, noticing faint ancient runes carved into the sand, barely visible unless you knew where to look. They seemed to pulse with a magical energy, faint yet undeniably present. The heat from the sand underfoot didn't faze him, the mana kept him shielded from the oppressive temperature. It didn't take long for him to realize the place felt familiar. He had seen this before, or at least something similar that he read about. As he walked deeper into the desert, the realization hit him. The runes weren't just scattered, they were forming a pattern, a series of sigils that reminded him of an ancient ritual, something tied to magic itself. The air seemed to shimmer, as if the fabric of reality was barely holding itself together in this place. A trial of magic. Arthur muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing as he took in his surroundings. Looks like I'm in for something bigger than just brute force here. The system notification came soon after, flashing with its usual prompt, "System notification, collect 6 permits with the symbol of the lightning bolt to unlock the gate to the boss room in level 50. Arthur let out a soft chuckle, running a hand through his hair. Right. A puzzle. Just what I needed. He looked around, then raised an eyebrow. Permits with lightning bolts? Sounds like someone, so the theme this time is all about magic, I wonder. His thoughts trailed off, the weight of the mysterious trials ahead settling over him. He took a seat on the warm sand, the ever-present heat still doing little to deter him. Let's see. Arthur muttered, summoning his soldiers from the shadows. His demon soldiers formed a circle around him, standing in eerie silence as he began to focus. He reached into his interface, the familiar status bar flashing before him. The numbers, the powers, the skills he had amassed. Everything had brought him this far, but according to his speculation, the fight at level 50 it about to be a whole new level. He needed to be prepared. Name, Arthur Blackwind. Job, Necromancer. Title, Bane of the Unworthy. Plus 20% attack against those who harbor evil intent. Level, 60 to 80. Fatigue, 30. HP, 6,600. MP, 8,150. Strength, 134 to 164. Health, 111 to 141. Agility, 85 to 135. Intelligence, 143 to 169. Sense, 76 to 100. Available ability points, 60 to 0. Passive skill, Tenacity, level 1. Job-specific skills, Shadow Extraction. Shadow Exchange. Monarch's domain, new in battle, increases the strength of all active shadows by 50%. Skills, Bloodlust, level 2. Ruler's Authority Mutilation, new targets vital points and inflicts critical damage by slashing with weapon. Sword Rush, new launches a barrage of sword strikes from all directions at the target. Equipment, Omega Hardened Hide Abyssforged Necklace, Inventory Happy Smiley Doomsday's Bone Gauntlets. Azarath Knight Armor Set. Greatsword of the Lowborn. Promethean Sword. Anticryptonian Blood Vial, Epic. Tower of Fate Key. Unknown Key. Arthur's eyes lingered on his stats, his gaze sharpening as he noted the increase in his agility and sense. With the upcoming battle and what was clearly an increase in magical prowess, his speed would be more crucial than ever. If it's that person I'm going up against in level 50, I'm going to need to be extremely quick. He let out a slight grin. With a determined nod, he allocated his ability points into agility and sense, pushing his physical prowess and reflexes to the limit. He needed to be faster, smarter, and deadlier. These abilities should give me the edge. I can't afford to waste time on this level. No distractions. He pulled his sword out of its sheath, testing its weight, the Promethean sword singing in the air. He felt the familiar surge of power from his equipment, his shadows around him ready and waiting. The system's been testing me. I can feel it. Magic, strength, strategy, everything's been building to something. I wonder what the hell it's preparing me for, but it doesn't matter. I'll deal with it. The world outside the tower had been normal. At least, relatively normal. It had been 4 days since Arthur entered the Tower of Fate, and while he was facing trials in an alternate dimension, chaos was slowly unfolding across the earth. In Gotham, Metropolis, and various other major cities, strange reports began flooding the airwaves. Jump City included. Gotham City late afternoon. In the Batcave, the dimly lit room hummed with the low whirring of computer monitors. Batman stood rigid in front of his terminal, his eyes locked onto the live feed of Jump City. The reports were troubling, but not yet catastrophic. People were acting weird. "It's happening," Batman muttered, his voice grim. Alfred, ever composed, glanced up from his position, watching Batman scan the footage. "Not like your usual chaos, Master Wayne. This is peculiar." Alfred's eyebrow arched as he observed the people on the screens, with one man, perhaps in his 30s, dancing down the street, his arms flailing like a ragdoll, singing the theme song of an old children's show. It was bizarre. Then, on another screen, a group of people were suddenly fixated on a street lamp. Not in a serious way, no. They were obsessed, touching it, hugging it, admiring it as if it were some kind of precious relic. Batman was analyzing the situation. "I know who's behind this." He clenched his fists, a grimace creeping across his usually stoic face. The Joker had struck again. At the Hall of Justice, the Justice League was already scrambling. Superman paced in front of the main console, rubbing his temples as he tried to process the reports coming in. "We've got pockets of anarchy spreading like wildfire. The Joker's involved, I'm sure of it. But how could he do this?" Wonder Woman, standing with her arms crossed, eyed the footage with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. "What is this? People acting like they've lost their minds." Green Lantern was already on edge. "So you're telling me that some guy is out there, playing a game where people start randomly singing songs or obsessing over streetlights? And we can't even find him?" He threw up his hands in exasperation. Batman's voice cut through the chatter, his tone grave but calculated. He stepped into the room, his cape billowing slightly behind him. "You are correct, Clark, it's the Joker. He's releasing some kind of virus. It doesn't kill people, but it messes with their behavior, causes chaos, confusion. The people are acting erratic, irrational, almost like puppets in this game of his." He paused, looking out at the footage of Jump City. "He's been targeting large cities, but I'm afraid this is only the beginning." Wonder Woman clenched her fist. "We need to stop this, Bruce. People are going to get hurt, and Joker's nowhere to be found. We're dealing with one of his stupid games, but how long until it becomes more than just this?" Batman stood at the center of the Hall of Justice, his arms crossed, his eyes locked onto the chaotic footage of Jump City. The Joker's virus had turned the city into a madhouse of unpredictable insanity, people breaking into spontaneous dance battles, others treating street signs like holy relics, an entire neighborhood spiraling into bizarre, nonsensical conflicts. "I think I know where Joker is." That got their attention. Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, and the others turned toward him, waiting. Batman's gaze was cold, calculating. Robin intercepted some data. The virus has been spreading chaotically, except in one location in Jump City. He brought up a map on the holographic display, highlighting a section where the virus should have spread but hadn't. There is one spot in Jump City that is weirdly untouched. It's controlled there. Contained. Green Lantern frowned. "You're saying he's setting up camp there?" "Not unlikely," Batman corrected. "This isn't just random chaos, there's a pattern. And we need to stop him before it evolves into something worse." Flash leaned back in his chair. "All right, then we go in, take him down before this gets any crazier." "No." Batman's voice was firm. "I'll investigate alone." Superman stepped forward. "Bruce." "I'll work with Robin," Batman cut in. "Maybe the Titans. But we can't send the full force of the League into Jump City without tipping Joker off. He thrives on escalation. If he knows we're onto him, he'll trigger something worse before we even get close." Tower of Fate, Level 50. Arthur stood before a massive stone door, his Prometheum sword resting against his shoulder as he gazed at the intricate lightning bolt symbol carved into the center. The structure itself resembled an ancient fortress, almost like a castle lost to time, its massive walls cracked and weathered. A storm brewed in the skies above, though not a single drop of rain fell, only the distant rumble of thunder and the occasional flicker of lightning illuminating the ominous gateway. He let out a slow breath, glancing at the permits in his hand, 6 metallic tablets, each inscribed with a different rune, but they all had the lightning bolt symbol. He had spent the last 9 floors searching for them, facing nothing but endless ruins, abandoned structures, and old relics of a civilization long past. Arthur rolled his shoulders. Gotta say, this was the least fun set of floors so far. Just scavenging through ancient ruins like a damn treasure hunter. At least the assassins and those winged bastards actually put up a fight. He turned his attention back to his shadow soldiers, standing silently behind him, Doom's towering form, Blade's ever-watchful stance, and the others waiting in the darkness. You all did good. Even if there wasn't much fighting, I'll give credit where it's due. As if responding to his words, the permits in his hand suddenly trembled. Arthur narrowed his glowing blue eyes, watching as they lifted into the air, each one rotating as ancient energy pulsed through them. Slowly, they drifted toward the massive stone door, embedding themselves in circular slots along the edges. The moment the last permit locked into place, the lightning bolt symbol erupted with golden energy, bright enough to make Arthur squint. The entire door trembled, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface before boom. The stone crumbled away, disintegrating into nothing as a path was revealed. Beyond it lay an entrance to something grand, something regal. Arthur exhaled through his nose. That's my cue to enter. He stepped forward, his boots echoing against the polished black marble floors as he entered. The interior was nothing like the ruins he had explored before in these levels. This one felt alive. Grand, towering columns lined the vast hall, adorned with golden carvings of gods and warriors. The place radiated ancient power, and the very walls seemed to hum with magic. Massive banners hung from above, tattered yet still proud, displaying the sigil of Karnak which Arthur recognized. Arthur's eye scanned the chamber, taking in the unmistakable architecture, the engravings on the walls, the aura of magic. A slow smirk crept onto his face. Yep. It's confirmed. His footsteps carried him deeper into the throne room. The massive doors leading inside were already open, almost as if expecting him. Inside, the hall stretched into a grand chamber, its high ceiling illuminated by crackling lightning suspended in the air like a storm frozen in time. And at the very end, atop a flight of ancient stone steps, there sat a throne. It wasn't anything special like a king's throne meant to show wealth. No, this was a throne meant for a ruler who took his place through strength alone. And Arthur knew exactly who it belonged to. Seated upon it was a man. In a black and gold uniform, the figure sat in complete stillness, his muscular frame resembling that of a warrior. A regal yet oppressive presence radiated from him, and though he had yet to speak, the sheer authority in the air was suffocating. His piercing eyes, glowing faintly with lightning energy, slowly opened, settling directly on Arthur. Arthur exhaled, gripping his sword tighter as his smirk widened. "It's Black Adam, all right," he muttered, before tilting his head slightly. "Or should I say, Tess Adam?" The name echoed through the throne room like a challenge, and for the first time since entering, Arthur felt a shift in the air, something dangerous. The ruler of Karnak had acknowledged him. A low hum vibrated through the air as Tess Adam slowly rose from his throne. Every movement, from the tightening of his fists to the way his cloak shifted, carried an undeniable weight. This was no ordinary foe. This was a true warrior, a warrior who had lived for centuries, who had conquered, ruled, and destroyed without hesitation. His glowing eyes burned with something deeper than rage. Arthur watched as Adam straightened to his full height, his godlike physique exuding power. The moment his feet touched the marble floor, cracks splintered outward from the sheer pressure of his presence. Without a word, Adam took a single step forward and then vanished. Arthur's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. Fast! Before he could react, a black and gold blur was already upon him, and then boom! Arthur barely managed to twist his body as a fist came crashing toward his chest. Even while dodging, the sheer force sent a shockwave through the room, shattering the marble floor beneath them. Arthur skid backward, his boots carving trenches into the ground as he steadied himself. Very fast, he muttered, his glowing blue eyes sharpening. Good. Raising a hand, he snapped his fingers. From the shadows of the throne room, dozens of creatures emerged, dark, monstrous figures with glowing eyes. They slithered, crawled around the chamber, surrounding Adam like a pack of wolves. Scatter, Arthur commanded. Like whispers in the dark, the shadows melted into the room, disappearing into the cracks, the walls, the very air itself. They would strike when needed, but for now, Arthur wanted this fight alone. No blade. No doom. Just him. Adam raised a brow, glancing at the disappearing shadows before his gaze returned to Arthur. You rely on trickery, he said, his deep voice like rolling thunder. Will you fight from the shadows like a coward? Arthur chuckled, rolling his shoulders. Now. I just have a lot of options, and I like using them. And then, lightning struck. Adam raised a hand, summoning the storm itself. Bolts of golden energy rained down upon Arthur, turning the throne room into a battlefield of crackling electricity. Arthur's eyes gleamed. He extended his hand ruler's authority. The lightning stopped midair. It twisted, warped, and then, with a flick of Arthur's fingers, redirected. The very bolts Adam had summoned curved back toward him, striking with the force of a divine weapon. But Adam did not flinch. He simply floated over it, the electricity hitting the wall behind him before dispersing into nothing. Adam moved again, faster this time, his form blurring as he closed the distance. Arthur barely managed to raise his Promethean sword before Adam's fist crashed against it. The impact sent a shockwave through the entire throne room, sending pillars crumbling and debris flying in all directions. Arthur twisted his blade, using Adam's own momentum to pivot, his footwork swift, fluid, as he drove a knee toward Adam's ribs. But Adam caught his leg midair and, with a flick of his wrist, and threw him across the throne room. Arthur crashed into a pillar, shattering it into dust before flipping midair and landing on one knee. His grin hadn't faded. Damn, all right. You hit like a truck, this is the fight I was looking for. Adam's response? A single word. Shazam! A bolt of divine lightning crashed down upon him, engulfing his form in golden energy. For a brief moment, he was nothing but a silhouette in the storm, before he re-emerged even faster than before. Arthur braced himself, gripping his sword tightly. Maybe I really should go all out, he muttered, eyes glowing even brighter. Let's see if you can keep up. And then Adam vanished again. Arthur had barely a fraction of a second to react before a fist came crashing towards his face. He twisted his body at the last moment, narrowly avoiding the strike, but boom! The sheer force of Adam's punch detonated the air behind him, sending debris flying in every direction. Arthur barely managed to raise his arms before a second punch came, this time aimed at his ribs. He blocked, only for his entire body to be sent skidding across the floor, his boots grinding against the cracked marble. Adam didn't let up. He was already on him again, throwing a brutal sequence of attacks. Punches, kicks, elbows, every move precise, overwhelming, and unrelenting. But Arthur wasn't some sluggish brute. He moved fluidly, dodging a lightning-fast uppercut, twisting his body to evade a knee strike, parrying a punch with his forearm. Fist met fist. Kick met kick. A demigod met a monarch. Arthur ducked under a swing, driving his knee into Adam's side, making the ancient warrior grunt. But Adam retaliated instantly, grabbing Arthur's leg and hurling him through a nearby pillar. Arthur twisted midair, planting his feet on the shattered remains before launching himself back at Adam. His greatsword appeared in his hand, flashing in his grip. Clang! Adam caught the greatsword with his bare hands, lightning crackling from his fingertips. "Your tricks mean nothing, boy," Adam snarled, pushing forward. Arthur grinned through the struggle. "I dunno, but you haven't seen all of them yet." With a surge of ruler's authority, he forced Adam's own grip to loosen, just enough for him to wrench the sword free. Arthur twisted, slashing upward, sending a shockwave of force through the throne room. Adam barely dodged, but Arthur was already moving. He kicked off the ground, flipping over Adam's head, landing behind him with a roll, and this time, he didn't waste a second. He equipped his Doomsday's Bone gauntlets. His fist shot forward, driven by every ounce of his monstrous strength. Crack! The impact was thunderous. The shockwave rippled through the air as Arthur's punch connected squarely with Adam's jaw, sending the ancient champion soaring across the throne room like a cannonball. Adam's body smashed through a marble pillar, then another until he finally collided with the throne itself, shattering the stone seat into rubble. Dust and debris rained down as Adam lay amidst the wreckage, a deep groove in the floor marking his brutal trajectory. Arthur exhaled, rolling his shoulders as his knuckles tingled from the sheer force of the blow. Then, a grin stretched across his face, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "I'm enjoying this, don't disappoint me, Adam." Lightning struck. Adam spun, hurling a bolt of divine energy at point-blank range. Arthur barely managed to weave around it, the heat singing his cheek as it exploded against the wall behind him. But before he could recover, another bolt. Then another. And another. Arthur dodged left, right, ducked, slid beneath one, flipping over another, his agility being pushed to its absolute limit as Adam continued his relentless storm. Arthur muttered to himself, "I knew this would happen. I came here more than prepared for your strikes." But then Adam's hand sparked with golden energy. He pulled his hands apart, forming a crackling sphere of condensed lightning, the air itself vibrating from its sheer power. "This ends now," Adam declared. And then he hurled it, a massive, devastating surge of power heading straight for Arthur. Arthur smirked. Shadow exchange. In an instant, he disappeared, just as the lightning obliterated where he once stood. But instead of him, one of his shadow demons took the full brunt of the attack, vanishing into smoke and mist. And before Adam could even process it, Arthur reappeared behind him. Sword rush. His blade exploded into motion, launching a barrage of lightning-fast slashes from all directions. Adam barely managed to react, his arms coming up as he blocked strike after strike. Clang! 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 But Arthur wasn't stopping. Sword rush, sword rush, sword rush. Each strike came from a different angle, relentless, overwhelming, unstoppable, until finally, Arthur's last swing broke through, slicing across Adam's chest. A thin line of blood formed. Adam's golden eyes flickered down to the cut, his fingers brushing over the searing pain for just a moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lifted his gaze to Arthur. "You dare spill the blood of Teth, Adam." His voice was thunder, carrying with it the weight of centuries of power. Lightning crackled wildly around his form, his fury manifesting in raw power. "You will learn what it means to wound a king." Before Arthur could react, Adam lunged. A brutal hand clamped around Arthur's throat, fingers tightening like an unbreakable vice. Then, they were airborne. The world blurred as Adam soared skyward at a speed that shattered the very air around them. The heavens roared with his fury, the desert below shrinking to a mere speck. Then, lightning surged, a devastating bolt forming in the storm above, ready to incinerate Arthur in Adam's grasp. But just as it struck, Arthur vanished. A shadow demon took his place. The bolt of divine lightning obliterated the shadow demon that he was holding, scorching the very air itself around him. Adam's eyes widened, scanning below, and there, standing miles beneath him on the ruined throne room floor, was Arthur, waving sarcastically. "Did you really think I'd let you fry me that easily?" Arthur called out, smirking. Adam's lips curled in a snarl, his rage exploding as he descended like a meteor, electricity dancing violently around his form. Arthur's eyes glowed, and as Adam closed the distance, he simply muttered, "Now is the time." Doom emerged. The monstrous shadow burst from the darkness, its massive frame colliding with Adam in midair. The force of impact was cataclysmic, sending out shockwaves that cracked the ground and shattered nearby pillars. Doom's gargantuan arms wrapped around Adam, crushing him in a bone-snapping embrace, its fists hammering down with unstoppable force. Adam roared, his body erupting with lightning, striking at the beast, but Doom did not yield. Arthur joined the assault. He charged, his doomsday-boned gauntlets gleaming as he struck like a force of nature. Adam swung a devastating punch, Arthur blocked it effortlessly, his armor absorbing the impact, dispersing the energy harmlessly. Then, Arthur countered. A knee slammed into Adam's ribs, followed by a brutal elbow to the head, then a spinning backhanded strike, sending Adam staggering. Arthur grinned. "What's wrong, old man? This isn't the same mighty Black Adam, is it?" Adam's eyes flashed with unrelenting fury. He raised his hands, lightning forming, crackling with divine power. But before he could unleash it, Doom's massive fist crashed into his stomach, sending him hurtling back like a ragdoll. Arthur laughed. "Oh, this is fun." Adam struggled to rise, fury burning in his gaze, but Arthur was already moving. He dove forward, fist cocked back, his gauntlets radiating power. "Let's see how much of a god you really are." The sky cracked with thunder, and the battle raged on. Arthur, Doom, and Blade fought as a unit, relentless and overwhelming. Doom was a walking calamity, his sheer size and brute strength forcing Adam into constant motion, his monstrous fist sending tremors through the throne room with every missed swing. Blade was precision, unleashing a barrage of deadly shadow bullets, each one laced with dark energy, forcing Adam to react on multiple fronts. And Arthur? Arthur was the executioner. Every clash of their blows shattered the air. Lightning and shadow danced in a chaotic storm of power. Fist met fist, sword clashed against divine strikes, pure skill against raw might. Adam blurred forward, lightning wrapping his entire form, a human storm of power. He smashed into Doom, sending the beast staggering back, before pivoting mid-air, his eyes locking onto Arthur. Boom! Adam's fist came rocketing forward, aiming to cave in Arthur's skull. But Arthur tilted his head at the last second, the punch brushed past his cheek by a fraction of an inch. Too slow. Arthur's knee drove into Adam's stomach, forcing the air from his lungs. Before Adam could counter, Blade fired a shadow bullet, striking him in the side of his face. It didn't pierce his skin, but it was enough to make him flinch, and that moment was all Arthur needed. He spun, slashing across Adam's chest with his Promethean sword, sparks flying as it tore through enchanted skin. Adam staggered, but his fury was unrelenting. Enough! Adam roared, his voice shaking the throne room itself. His eyes burned with ancient wrath, and he slammed both hands together. The room erupted in a pillar of lightning. Blade was sent flying, leaving Arthur alone in the center of the storm. Adam appeared before him, a blur of divine speed, fist cocked back. Arthur caught the punch. The impact shattered the floor beneath them, sending cracks ripping through the throne room. The two locked eyes, power colliding, unstoppable force against unyielding will. Arthur smirked. That all you got? You are getting tired and slow. Adam's glare hardened. You mock me, but you are a child playing with power beyond your understanding. Arthur tightened his grip around Adam's fist. Maybe. But I'm still winning. He yanked Adam forward and drove his forehead straight into Adam's nose. Crack! Blood splattered as Adam recoiled, dazed for half a second too long. Arthur vanished. Shadow exchange. Swapping with one of the ever-moving shadow demons around them. He reappeared directly above Adam, mid-air, sword already in motion. Adam barely reacted in time, raising his arms in an X to block, but Arthur had no intention of cutting him. Instead, he twisted mid-air, dropped his sword, and drove a monstrous kick into Adam's exposed gut. Adam rocketed back, crashing through his own destroyed throne. Adam coughed, rising to a knee, his body sparking with unstable lightning. He spat blood onto the shattered floor, his glare never wavering. Arthur landed, picking up his sword. He exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. "You're tougher than I thought you would be." Adam, breathing heavily, wiped the blood from his lips. "And you are not as weak as I thought." Arthur tilted his head. "Oh?" Almost sounds like respect. Adam's eyes burned with fatigue. "Do not mistake acknowledgement for pleading mercy." Arthur simply smirked. Then he vanished. Adam barely had time to process it before locking eyes with the monster that appeared before him, blue eyes glowing thick with bloodlust. The Promethean sword drove through his chest. Arthur didn't hold back. It was a stab with monstrous force, brutal, lightning fast, and absolute. His sword pierced through Adam's heart, the weight of the blow driving the once mighty warrior to his knees. Adam's breath hitched. His fingers trembled, trying to grip the blade that had impaled him. Lightning crackled weakly around his body, flickering like a dying flame. Arthur leaned down, his face inches from Adam's. Admirable fight. Adam coughed, blood dripping from his lips, but his glare remained defiant. "This will not be the end of me." Arthur nodded. "I know. I would love to fight you in the outside world," Arthur muttered to himself. He twisted the blade. Adam's body jerked, and then collapsed. Ding! Level 50 cleared. You may proceed to the next floor or exit the tower. You leveled up. You leveled up. You leveled up. New items acquired. Arthur glanced at the two glowing artifacts materializing before him. Amulet of Shazam's Wrath. Forged in the heart of Karnak, this amulet once channeled the fury of the gods through Black Adam. Plus 50% lightning damage, plus 30% resistance to magic attacks, plus 20. Strength. Arthur lifted the amulet, feeling residual power thrumming within it, the very essence of divine wrath. Damn, this is serious. He could already think of a few opponents that could have a hard time against him now. Then his gaze moved to the second item. Shattered Bolt. A fragment of the divine lightning that once empowered a champion of the gods. Though broken, it still crackles with untamed energy, waiting for a master to reshape its power. Looks like I've got another piece to play with. I wonder what I can craft with this. Arthur sighed, looking down at Adam's fading corpse. His fingers twitched at the thought, but he already knew the answer. TCH. Shame I can't extract the shadows of the foes here. Even a shadow of Black Adam would have been a monstrous addition to his army. But the tower played by its own rules. It allowed him to grow, to sharpen himself, but it never let him extract the shadows of the fallen enemies. He exhaled and turned toward the massive, looming gateway ahead. The way forward. The next level. The system's choice hovered before him. Proceed to the next floor or exit the tower. Arthur took one last glance at Adam's fallen form before shaking his head. I see no reason not to, he muttered, stepping toward the next trial. Next low, his body froze. Arthur's eyes snapped open, glowing with a deep, ominous light. His breath hitched as a pulse of energy surged through him, an echo calling out from the other side of reality. It was faint, but undeniable. A signal. A warning. The shadow soldier he left back home had activated their link. Something was wrong. Arthur's expression hardened in an instant. Without hesitation, he moved. His body blurred into a swirl of darkness as he issued the silent command. Exit the tower. Arthur stepped into his house, his boots pressing against the wooden floor with a quiet creak. The familiar scent of home lingered in the air, but something was off. His blue eyes scanned the scene before him. Bodies sprawled across the room, some slumped over furniture, others piled on top of one another like discarded dolls. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. What the hell? The men didn't look like the usual burglars. No ski masks, no black gloves, not even a crowbar in sight. Just regular people. Their clothes were casual. But their faces, some of them had that grin. That wide, unnatural smile. The kind that made his stomach churn. Arthur's shadow stretched unnaturally beneath him, and from it rose a kneeling figure. His shadow demons, their glowing eyes fixated on him, waiting for orders. The shadow I exchanged with did this to them, but this is just disturbing. Arthur asked, motioning toward the unconscious, weird-looking faces. Arthur's voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Patrol the area. The whole neighborhood. If you find anyone like this, he gestured toward the unconscious intruders, his eyes flickering with something sharp, contain them. No killing. I want answers first. The shadow demons didn't need to be told twice. It vanished into the darkness, dispersing like mist. Arthur clenched his fists. His thoughts were interrupted by a sound of uneven breathing. Arthur followed the noise, stepping over the unconscious bodies without another word. He walked with purpose, boots clicking against the wooden floor, his senses sharp. As he reached the door, he could hear the sound of breathing, soft and erratic. He pushed it open. His mother was huddled in the corner, clutching a fire poker with shaking hands. The second she saw him, her breath hitched. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice cracking. Before he could say anything, she rushed him. She wrapped her arms around him, squeezing so tightly that for a second, he almost lost balance. He felt her shaking, her breath uneven against his shoulder. "Thank God," she choked out. "Thank God you're okay." Arthur, after a moment of surprise, slowly returned the embrace. "Yeah, Mom. I'm home." She pulled back just enough to cup his face, scanning him as if trying to make sure he was real. "I thought, I didn't know if..." "Arthur, people went crazy. They just came in. Laughing, breaking things I had to hide. And then something killed them all, something." Her eyes flicked over his shoulder. Arthur barely had time to register his mother's panicked grip on his arms before he heard it, the distinct, guttural growl of one of his shadow demons behind him. His gut told him exactly what that meant. Oh shit. Already? Arthur turned around, and sure enough, there it was, one of his shadow demons that he just sent away, looming in the doorway, its glowing eyes locked onto him. And in its claws? A man. Writhing. Suspended in mid-air like a freshly caught fish. The guy was flailing, eyes bulging, his mouth twisted into an unnervingly wide grin. He was laughing, but it wasn't normal laughter. It was a high-pitched, gasping cackle, the kind that scraped against the walls and made your skin crawl. His mother screamed, "It's that thing," she blurted out. It killed them." "Oh my God, Arthur, Arthur ran a hand down his face, already feeling the headache forming. "Mom," Arthur interrupted, his voice steady. "Calm down, they are not even dead." "Calm down? Calm down. Arthur, that thing." Arthur turned to the shadow soldier and, with a simple motion of his hand. The shadow demon obeyed instantly. Releasing its grip, it lowered its head and silently melted into the darkness at the corner of the room, fading back into his own shadows like it had never been there at all. His mother stared. Mouth slightly open. Eyes wide. The man dropped like a sack of potatoes onto the floor, landing on his back, but he didn't stop laughing. Even curled up, coughing from the impact, he still wheezed out chuckles, his lips twisted into that grotesque grin. Arthur and his mother just stared at him. The dude just lay there, laughing. Arthur sighed, rubbing his jaw as he stared at the man still laughing on the floor. All right. Enough of that. Lifting a hand, he called upon ruler's authority. An unseen force wrapped around the man's body, lifting him effortlessly into the air. His limbs dangled like a marionette with its strings cut, but that grin never faded. His eyes were wide, empty in a way that made Arthur's skin crawl. But he just kept laughing, breathless and manic. Arthur's voice was cold. Who sent you? Are you under someone's influence? Poisoned? No answer. Just more wheezing, cackling, shaking. His fingers twitched, tightening his unseen grip. Do you even understand what I'm saying? Still nothing. Arthur exhaled through his nose, patience thinning. Fine. Be useless, then, it was worth a try. Without hesitation, he pulled the man toward him and drove his elbow straight into his gut. The laughter stopped instantly. The guy's eyes bulged, his body jerking as all the air left his lungs at once. A strangled croak escaped his throat before his head lolled forward, completely unconscious. Arthur let him go, letting his body drop to the floor like a discarded puppet. Silence. Arthur sighed and crossed his arms and turned towards his mother. Okay, look, I know how this looks. You know how this looks. His mother threw her hands in the air. Arthur, there are unconscious people in our house. A demon that apparently listens to you just dragged another lunatic here. What part of this is normal? Arthur exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. Mom, I'll explain everything in time. But first, tell me what the hell is going on. The room was quiet, aside from the occasional distant sound of sirens echoing through the city. His mother had told him everything, the sudden chaos, the people acting erratically, the growing sense of dread spreading through Jump City. It wasn't just crime, it was something worse. Something unnatural. Arthur sat back in his chair, arms crossed as he processed it all. I see, he muttered, eyes sharp. So it's a toxin of some sort affecting people. I already have in mind a few suspects who could pull off something on this scale. His mother, sitting across from him, suddenly reached out and grabbed his hands, squeezing them tightly. There was an urgency in her grip, a fear laced into every word as she whispered, These suspects, it's those supervillains, isn't it? Arthur didn't answer immediately. He could see the way her fingers trembled, the way she held his hands as if she were afraid he'd slip away. She already knows the answer. Her voice was smaller now, but still steady. So you have powers like them? Arthur's lips curled into a small, humorless smile. Yeah, but I have greater powers than the freaks you detest. His mother inhaled sharply, her eyes flickering with something he couldn't quite place. I? She hesitated, lips parting as if she wanted to say something, anything, before closing them again. Arthur watched her carefully, waiting. Nothing. He exhaled through his nose and stood up, gently pulling his hands away from hers. What about my BR? He stopped himself. What about my brother? She blinked, as if just remembering. He's at his company, locked in, can't leave because of. She didn't need to finish. Arthur already understood. The city was spiraling, and anyone with power or influence would be holed up, trying to avoid the madness. All right. Arthur rolled his shoulders, his mind already working. I'll know what to do. If they're here, whoever did this, I know I can find them. His mother's face twisted in concern. You can't possibly think to go out in Thai. I will. He didn't raise his voice, but the weight behind his words was absolute. Final. She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. She found none. Arthur exhaled, his eyes glowing with a faint, eerie radiance as he pushed himself up from the chair. Time to move. With a flick of his wrist, shadows twisted and coiled at his side, forming into a familiar-shaped blade. The shadow materialized in silence, his glowing eyes locked forward, waiting for a command. Stay here. Guard this place. Kill if you have to. Blade nodded, stepping forward until he stood beside Arthur's mother. She tensed immediately, her body going rigid at the presence of the towering shadow warrior now stationed at her side. Arthur barely spared her reaction a glance. His mind was already elsewhere. What the hell are the League and the Titans doing, letting things spiral like this? He muttered under his breath. His jaw tightened as his fingers curled into fists. Incompetent fools. Then cello, Arthur. Arthur's head tilted slightly, his glowing eyes narrowing. A slow grin spread across his face. Speak of the devil. Arthur exhaled through his nose, his irritation spiking the moment he felt the familiar shift in the air, dark energy, the faint scent of incense, and something almost otherworldly. His eye twitched. Do you ever knock? He said flatly, turning to face the new arrival. Raven stood in his living room, arms crossed, her hood slightly lowered. Her expression was neutral, but he could see it, the faintest glint of amusement in her violet eyes. Well, this time, there's a situation, she replied, ignoring his tone. And I know you're going to involve yourself again. Arthur scoffed. Of course I will. You guys are incompetent at your jobs. Raven sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. That's a bit harsh to say. She opened her mouth to continue, but I'm not going to work with you guys. Arthur cut her off, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. She sighed again, this time in resignation. I know. I wasn't here to convince you. I'm only warning you that Batman is in town. He's looking into this mess with Robin and Green Lantern. Arthur raised an eyebrow. And you're telling me this because? Raven tilted her head slightly. Maybe because Batman is the type of person that would probably try to. Arthur cut her off again, his glowing eyes narrowing, his voice dropping an octave. Do you really think Batman can actually harm me? A low chuckle escaped him, dark and full of amusement. He can't. His lips curled into a smirk. I'll find whoever did this, and he'll pay for it. Simply because I was in the middle of something, and they interrupted me. Raven didn't say anything for a moment, just observing him. Then she asked something that was on her mind for a long time now. Do you have a way to avoid being tracked? Arthur narrowed his eyes but didn't answer. He simply turned around. That's when Raven stiffened because she felt it before she saw it. The presence in the room. Arthur's mother had been standing there the entire time. Watching. Listening. The silence was painfully awkward. Raven blinked. Shit. Mrs. Blackwing folded her arms, raising an eyebrow. Another girl, who? Raven's eyes widened slightly. Wait, another girl. Arthur ran a hand down his face. Nothing you need to worry about. His mother glanced between them, clearly making assumptions. Then she narrowed her eyes at Raven, realization clicking. I know who you are. You're one of those Titans. Raven, slightly flustered but trying to maintain composure, quickly gave a small, respectful bow. Sorry for being here without permission, Miss Blackwind. Mrs. Blackwind just gave her a long, unreadable look before sighing and rubbing her temples. I don't even know what to say anymore. Arthur smirked at Raven. Maybe try calling instead of teleporting here every chance you get, Raven. Raven said, half embarrassed. I will. Also, what's this about another girl? Arthur walked towards the door, his hand resting on the handle. He didn't turn around as he spoke, his voice low and unwavering. "I know you probably know more than you just shared," he said, his glowing eyes reflecting faintly in the dim light. "So either you be helpful, or I'll do it my way. It's not a problem for me." Raven stayed silent at first, watching him, her gaze unreadable. She didn't flinch under the weight of his words, but he could tell she was thinking, calculating. Arthur pulled open the door. "All right," she finally said. He stopped mid-step. "I'll help," she added. "Just this once." Arthur turned his head slightly, smirking. "Oh? And what changed your mind?" Raven crossed her arms. "Batman insisted that he'll only work with Robin on this. Since we're dealing with the Joker." Arthur let the word sink in for a moment before he scoffed. "Joker alone did this?" His voice dripped with disbelief. "Able to spread a toxin to multiple cities? Bullshit." His smirk disappeared, replaced by a sharp, calculating expression. "I had a few suspects in mind, he was among them. But someone else is involved, I'm sure." He shook his head. "Batman isn't stupid. If he insisted on working alone with Robin, it's because he doesn't want you to know about certain things." Raven frowned slightly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your dear employer is keeping you in the dark," Arthur replied coolly. "That should tell you something." Raven's gaze flickered, her mind working through the implications. Then she exhaled sharply and lifted her hands. "Azarath, Metrion, Zinthos." A swirling portal of dark energy tore open before them, crackling with violet light. Beyond it, Arthur could see the towering silhouette of a building against the night sky, Jump City's broadcasting tower. Raven lowered her hands. "That's where Batman and Robin went." Green Lantern followed them. Arthur narrowed his eyes at the sight. "I'm not walking into a trap, am I, Raven?" She met his gaze, her voice steady. "No." Arthur stared at her for a long moment, searching for any sign of hesitation. Then, without another word, he simply said, "All right." And he jumped through. As soon as Arthur disappeared into the portal, Raven let out a small sigh, rubbing her temple. She turned around, only to find Arthur's mother staring at her with an expression caught between confusion and mild amusement, Blade, Arthur's trusty shadow soldier, next to her standing at the ready, staring at Raven. Raven cleared her throat, straightened her posture, and gave a small, awkward bow. "Ah. Sorry for intruding." "Again?" Mrs. Blackwind arched an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "MMHM." Raven held the bow for a second too long before awkwardly straightening. Then, without another word, she summoned another portal and quickly stepped through, vanishing in a swirl of dark energy. Jump City's broadcasting tower. The air was thick with an unnatural mist, a sickly green haze that clung to the ground like a living thing. It coiled through the empty streets, creeping along abandoned cars and curling around shattered streetlights. Arthur stood at the base of Jump City's broadcasting tower, his eyes glowing faintly as he observed the eerie silence. "No people. No bodies," he muttered to himself, narrowing his eyes. "Just this damn mist." A faint ding echoed in his mind. "Warning, a harmful substance has been detected in your bloodstream." Arthur tilted his head slightly, half expecting something. And before he could dwell on it, another notification followed immediately after. Longevity, immune to all diseases, poisons, and any abilities that can be harmful to your status. Foreign substance, neutralized. Arthur's lips curled into a small smirk. "As I expected." With a flick of his wrist, the shadows beneath him rippled, and his shadow demons emerged, twisted, hulking forms with eyes that burned like dying embers. They knelt before him, awaiting his command. Arthur's voice was firm, authoritative. Enter the tower. Keep to the shadows. Look for anything remotely suspicious. If you happen to see anyone, do not engage. The demons let out a silent acknowledgement before melting back into the darkness, their forms slipping away into the mist like phantoms. Arthur took a deep breath. Cracking his neck, his grip tightened around the hilt of his Promethean sword, its steel humming with an ominous energy. His eyes burned with an eerie glow. His voice was low, dark, filled with an unshakable promise of violence. I really want to find that clown here. I'll do this world one big favor once and for all. Arthur walked into the building. The weight behind those words was enough to make the very shadows tremble.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously appreciate it if you could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out a lot and keeps me going. Plus, it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.